Computers are amazing tools. And when the ones and zeros line up, they're just awesome. And when they stop lining up, you have a challenge. But safety teams are more than dealing with just the active shooter. You want to, what your team is.
I think they're having some issues with the live stream.
Okay, there we go. Okay. I guess if it happens again, I'll. Anyway, but for what is a safety team? It's trained people, and you'll hear me say training a lot because it's essential if you're going to have an intentional team. And you want to have trained people from the congregation that can deal with active violence, the active shooter, emotionally disturbed people, protesters. I've had a protester at my church. Emotionally disturbed people at my church. Medical emergencies. That's actually what you're going to deal with the most. And fire emergencies, you need to be ready for that. You also want someone to be able to direct first responders to that emergency wherever it is in the building. Because even though, my church is a bit larger than this, if we've got first responders coming to this church, when they come to those doors, do they go left or right? If we don't have somebody there to greet them, they may be a while finding the proper room where you're at, because the first responders aren't going to know where room 123 is, if we have a room 123. So that's what the safety team is. To address that active violence, the emotionally disturbed people, the protesters, whatever emergency may come up, or other emergency, and direct the first responders. Something that the staff will also want to respond, and I should have warned the tech team, this is also a video. It's about a 1-minute video from the FBI, and just wave at me when you're ready. This is something that most people in the church, most people don't think about active shooters until it's upon them. And you could see that reaction in some of the congregation. People said they have no idea what to do. You'd think people would say, well, you heard gunfire, you get out of there. And it's something called the OODA Loop. Observe, it's an Air Force term. Observe, orient, decide, act. And if your OODA Loop is not prepared to deal with the sudden unexpected sound of gunfire, your OODA Loop is messed up.
Active shooter incidents are rare, but they happen. You can survive. Scan for exits during a mass gathering to help shorten your reaction time and overcome the tendency to freeze. Survival is tied to action. Run if you can. Don't hesitate. Seconds matter. If you can't run, hide in a secure place.
There's actually a video that goes with this, but we still have the still image.
Find something to use as a weapon and don't fight fair. Go to. Active shooter incidents are rare, but they happen. You can survive. Scan for exits during a mass gathering to help shorten your reaction time and overcome the tendency to freeze. Survival is tied to action. Run if you can. Don't hesitate. Seconds matter. If you can't run, hide in a secure place. Fight only if you must. Find something to use as a weapon and don't fight fair. Go to fbi.gov/survive to learn more. Active shooter incidents are rare, but they happen. You can.
All right. So in that knife block they show in the last, I saw an almost identical knife block in the kitchen of this church. So with knives in it. But as church leaders, your congregation is quite unlikely to have thought about this. As church leaders, you're going to need to be ready to prepare people to run, fight, or hide. Or another term for it is the avoid, deny, defend. But so run if you can. But what if you're the teacher with a classroom full of kindergartners? Can you effectively run with those kindergartners that are like herding cats on catnip anyway across the street to a safe place? Probably not. You may have to lock down with those kids. Hide with those kids. Close the doors. Do your doors lock? Do you have something in the classroom you can barricade the doors with? Or does your door have a no lock and it opens outward and you don't have a way to secure it, except maybe hold on to it? So you need to know what you're dealing with in your particular, young kids, elderly, people that are not mobile. Do you need to hide with those people? Turn the lights off. Barricade the door, lock it if you can. Or if the person is upon you, in that last resort, fight. You may need to help lead that at some point. or if you're hiding and being prepared to fight that person if it comes in. But that's something that you've got to think about. And as church leaders, we're going to have congregants with us that are going to need that guidance. It's get down. You tell the person, or tell the group, get down. I want you to turn off those lights. I want you to lock that door. Make sure if we had blinds or something, or you take a look. Now, in this room, it would be very difficult to hide because there are so many windows all the way around. But if you take a look at where the person might be likely to come in, these windows are the ones we need to worry about. So the place you might be able to hide out of sight would be along that back row there. Might be the most difficult to see, but not a lot of place to hide in here. Or do we have an escape that we can use? Or create an escape? Those windows. That window opens, and that window that doesn't open normally, it can with a chair. You make your own door. So, fortunately, though, the active killer is the most rare, but it's the one that gets the most attention. We still have problems with violence from within the church, and a lot of these topics can come in from outside the church, disgruntled employees. I'm sure none of our churches we've had any employee issues, right? It's all churches and people get along well, right? I have that sense of humor that a cop has. It's very sarcastic. Domestics. Okay, the couple is getting the divorce. Which half of the couple keeps the church? And which one is angry about that? Or they come in and they do that. There have been domestics in churches where it's usually the male, because the males, we've got the biggest jerk ability, I guess. But he's come in and, the spouse that he's separated from executes her and kills himself in a church sanctuary during service. What do you do with that? Child custody, another ugly issue. It can be suicides. 2019, as I'm going to St. Louis General Conference, I did my best to help the bishop feel safe there. I can't quite call myself a bodyguard because I really don't have the arms for that. But just before we got there, in a Methodist church in St. Louis, there was a young military veteran who was upset when he left the church during services out of the sanctuary, went to the restroom, and committed suicide. He shot himself. What do you do with that? And emotionally disturbed persons, mental health issues. Do people come to church when they're in a crisis, a mental health crisis? Absolutely. Church controversy. Well, the Methodist Church doesn't have to deal with any controversy right now, right? Yeah, there's a little one in progress right now. And people aren't upset about that at all, right? Wow, some people are choosing to leave. And other people are saying, why have you done this to my church? What's going on? And protesters. I was coming to my church one day, no warning, and I see this guy that had pulled up he's got a van, he's parked on the street right in front of my church, and it's not really a parking area there, it's a pretty major thoroughfare. It's like, that's a great parking, it must have broke down. And then I see him pulling out signs, and it's like, oh, those are signs I've seen abortion protesters have. Those awful aborted fetuses pictures. And so I've got somebody that's deciding to protest my church. He's not letting us know about this, so I go talk to him. And when that man looked me in the eye and said that the United Methodist Church supports child sacrifice, it's like, I don't remember reading that in the discipline, but I haven't read that whole book. But I don't think that's in there. But are you going to be able to reason with the person who's got that opinion? No. I might as well tell that clock to say that it is 5 o'clock somewhere. Well, at 5 o'clock it'll get there, but it'll get there sooner than he would change his mind. So with that man, I just basically made sure he understood the rules of what could protest. Do you know the rules for people that can protest at your church? Do you know when they cross the line? They'll know when they can cross the line if they're experienced protesters, and what they want to do is capture you on video after they have incited you, and they have unbelievable supporters online. It's amazing. So you've got all these types of things as far as the potential for active violence. Humans in conflict have the potential for active violence. And even if it's over minor things, how many of you heard of, road rage? Somebody gets cut off and all of a sudden now somebody gets murdered for, a driving error that everyone has made. My God, what's going on? So active violence can be an issue. Medical emergencies. What are we dealing with here? Falls. A lot of our congregation is aging. They can be on a very nice, steady surface and still fall. My parents are at the age where they are falling regularly and it causes injury. Now we add, well, we're in Montana. You never have ice and snow outside, right? You know, any age person can be walking around out here and, you know, you look out at eye level and you see a pair of feet, realize they're yours, and you realize that what's going to follow is going to suck. Did I say that in church? You know, slips and falls, heart attack, a stroke, those can all happen in churches. We've called medical to my church more than once, and we've got a way to get medical in and out, and a lot of people not noticing. But are you equipped to handle that? Who's from this church in here? Okay. I'm going to put you on the spot. You're off the camera. Okay. And I'll ask forgiveness in advance. Do you have an AED in this church? Okay. You're in good company. So this church does not have. Yes. I strongly recommend every church have an AED. You also need to have a first aid kit that's beyond the, you know, the Walmart first aid kit with the, you know, Neosporin and the Band-Aids and stuff for church conference. Some of you may recognize me from running the safety team at church conference, okay? When we first started doing that, church conference has 2 AEDs that we bring. We've got first aid kits that there's no Band-Aids in it. There are tourniquets, there are chest seals, there are first aid supplies there for the things you never want to have to deal with, but are an unfortunate reality today. You've got to be prepared for the worst case scenario. Although when I'm doing the conference coordination for that, and I'm talking to the person who is used to setting up conferences for groups, and I'm asking her about those types of supplies, she looked at me and said, "What kind of group are you?" And about that tone of voice. And I just had to tell her, I'm the worst case scenario guy. And it's my job to think of the need for those things. So when we travel, you know, when we go and meet an annual conference, and hopefully we'll start meeting full in person again, we will have those supplies with us. And I pray that we have that as an exercise in preparedness, and we never have to use them. But the 2 or 3 annual conferences I've dealt with, we've had to call medical. We need medical and ambulance. We had some intoxicated Native Americans at the ones we had here in Billings. They disrupted the very beginning of that. A guy from my team was here to help. He escorted those guys off to the waiting officers that we had coordinated with. There's unfortunately the need. But do you have somebody for your first aid kit that knows how to use it? Have you ever opened up that AED? It'll talk you right through things. Is the battery good? Are the pads not expired? And do you have somebody that's training to keep them current? Because the time that you need an AED is not the first time to open it, although it will talk you exactly through the steps. They're wonderful. But when you've got that adrenaline, it's good to have heard that before. Fire emergencies. All of our churches have fire extinguishers, right? Anybody's church not have a fire extinguisher?
Mine expired in 1999. I'm working on that.
Okay. So, you know, you got those. Now, so all of us have fire extinguishers in our churches. Raise your hand if you've ever practiced with that fire extinguisher. I do see some hands. Awesome. That's good. Because there's a trick to it. You don't aim at the top of the flame, you aim at the base. And the training I did was actually with gasoline in a pan. And I was amazed at how hot that gasoline was close enough to put it out. And then when I actually had to put out a fire in my truck coming out of Eisenhower Tunnel in Colorado, I got through the tunnel. Somebody was saying, "You're throwing sparks." Opened my hood, smoke, flame, not good. I knew what to do with the fire extinguisher. And I told my wife, and I got the fire out, and I told my wife, call 911, get the fire department. She said, "Well, do we need them?" I said, "Yes, honey, I'm a cop, I'm not a firefighter. I want to make sure this is out." So we had some professionals with more water than the little tiny fire extinguisher. I had to come and check it. So, do you have an evacuation plan? Have you ever practiced it with your staff? Might be something to do. Carbon monoxide detectors. Those are good to have. There have been incidents in churches where carbon monoxide has overcome people. A fire alarm. We tested the fire alarm. We work the fire department. Do we know what happens when it gets pulled? Does it go to the alarm company? Does it go directly to the fire department? It's different in different agencies. And you have somebody that's trained to work with those. Just a quick hint, if you have to use the fire alarm to pull it, make that 911 call too, because the fire department would like to have more details than just there's a fire alarm going off. You know, there's a difference between the grease fire in the kitchen and the oil in that, you know, this having been dumped, maybe catch a fire here. In my church, we keep a fire extinguisher right here behind the candle. I thought I was going to use it one day. And fire extinguishers, by the way, if you've got to deal with somebody who's violent, they make a very good impact weapon up close, but even further away, that chemical, it's hard to fight if you can't breathe and you can't see. So, for your teams, armed or unarmed, that's a huge question for a lot of churches, and I can't answer that question for your church individually. Only you can. That's a decision you've got to make for yourself based on what is the culture of your church. I will say that I am an advocate for armed teams. Unarmed, or as we call it in the faith-based security network, which I'll talk later, you know, we call them non-intervention capable. You know, they can help with calling 911. You can encourage people to take cover, direct people out to evacuation, provide first aid. You can, if they're very good, they might be able to talk an unarmed person down, or maybe a person with a knife. They might be able to talk and calm a person down with de-escalation skills. It's very good. Unarmed persons have stopped active killers. I've met a guy, he was a school teacher, he stopped a man that was shooting students in his middle school. I called him a hero. He was. He called us heroes. And it's like, man, I've never stopped a shooter myself. You did. You did it. Armed teams, though, intervention-capable teams, they can engage the killer and they can reduce that death toll. And as far as my advocacy of armed teams, I'll just ask you, which church would you rather be? New Life Church, 2007, 1,000 people on the campus. They are attacked by an active killer who has thousands of rounds loaded in magazines and has multiple weapons. He murders 2 young girls in the parking lot, wounds 3, and is stopped by their team. Versus Sutherland Springs in Texas, a church with 50 people, as compared to 1,000. They're attacked. They had some parishioners that carried guns, but they've got no intentional plan about it, and all of the parishioners that happened to carry were not there that day. And 26 murdered, 20 wounded out of 50 people. In that shooting in Sutherland Springs, the man fired 700 plus rounds. I'm told the smoke was so thick you could hardly see inside the church. He was stopped when a neighbor heard the gunfire and barefoot goes to his gun safe, pulls out his AR, loads a magazine partially, and intervenes. Which church would you rather be? It is absolutely your culture that you have to pay attention to, and churches that choose to stay unarmed, I respect that. I won't say I understand it, but maybe you're a nicer person than I am. I don't know. It's not a character flaw to not want to have an armed team. It's not a character flaw to have an armed team. It's what is the culture for your church and your congregation and what their choice is. I just want to identify the risks. The armed team can reduce that death toll. Not stop it. There's no guarantees, but they can certainly reduce that quickly. Lethal versus non-lethal, or less lethal, or both. Okay, there's the argument, if you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. That can apply. Okay, if I only have a pistol as a safety team member, does everything look like something needs to be shot? I want safety teams to have 2 things. I think safety teams should have both, a lethal and a less lethal option. But what are there? Lethal attackers, certainly they're best countered by a lethal tool. Okay, if I've got somebody comes in with a firearm, I want a firearm to stop them with at a distance. I'm not real keen on saying, okay, Rick, we want you to be unarmed, but if somebody comes in with a gun, well, we're going to go hide, you go tackle them. Let me think about this. Where's my sign? If any of you know Bill Engvall. Here's my sign. But that is a choice, and it's a high liability item. It does require constant use of force training. By use of force training, I mean legal training. What is the law in your jurisdiction? I know what the law is in Colorado. What's the law in your jurisdiction? What can you do? What can you not do? And practice with it to maintain proficiency. Less lethal tools, OC spray, pepper spray, taser, a baton. I know churches that have all three of those. They can counter a non-lethal attacker and some lethal. I mean, the best tool to have in a fight, what do you think that is if you need a tool in a fight? You care to guess? There you go. It's the one you have with you. You know, I tell that to when I teach decisional shooting. What's the best gun to have in a gunfight? It's the one you have with you. Right now, I don't have any. I flew here, and TSA frowns at me bringing a gun or pepper spray in my carry-on luggage. They frown on that for some reason. But it's not a good idea to bring pepper spray or a taser or a baton to a gunfight. But if that's the only one you got to have, it's the best tool you got. It also requires use of force training. If you're going to carry even pepper spray, if you spray somebody with it, that can be an assault. All you need for assault, at least in Colorado, is to induce pain. Pepper spray induces pain. I've watched our recruits get sprayed with it many times. I'm so glad that when I came on the department, we were issued mace. They didn't require us to get sprayed with it. They just kind of handed it to us. Not the great training 30-some years ago. We do better training now. But when we switched to pepper spray and they wanted to spray us, some of the guys that had experience like me, okay, so if I'm going to carry that, I need to be sprayed with it? Okay, I'm not going to carry it. Okay, we'll train you, you don't have to be carried. Okay, or you don't have, we'll train you, you don't have to spray it. Okay, that'll work. And I've used pepper spray effectively. Works wonders. I call it aromatherapy. It works, but not 100% effective. Really, nothing is. And sometimes a less lethal tool can just raise the person's anger level, especially if you have a timid use of it. Tasers, a taser shoots out prongs like what police carry. Those can cost as much as a decent firearm. They'd be pricey. And with the civilian version of a taser, you've got to have training with it to understand how to use it. And you get one shot with it. I've deployed the taser on the street as a police officer 8 times. It is an awesome tool. You see a taser effectively deployed on somebody, it's kind of a thing of beauty. I don't have to fight them. They're under control immediately, and the attitude change is pretty instant, and they don't want to ride that lightning again. You know, that's electroshock therapy. But it's costly. But 3 of the 8 times I've deployed it, I had a clothing disconnect. One of the probes, the person's jacket or clothing was open lunch, and I didn't get a good connection. And we had to plan B to subdue the person. If you have a civilian version taser, and you need it, and you deploy the probes, and you miss with one probe and it's not effective, all of a sudden, excuse me, we're pretty close and we need plan B quickly. Not the greatest tool for, I think, in my opinion, for churches. OC spray, that's the gift that keeps on giving. Because if I were to spray Dale here in front of me, he's got a name tag on so I can pick on him by name. The 2 gentlemen beside him would get it. Is it Dorothy? Dorothy would get some. I would likely get, it keeps on giving spray. Now there is something that's newer in the past several years called gel, OC gel. I do recommend that for churches because I could, if I needed to spray Dale with it, I could do that without affecting the 2 people sitting beside him. Very effective stuff. And the aromatherapy is very good at distracting somebody and changing their mind. I used it in a bar downtown. One time we had about 6 or 8 people. One lady jumped in, and I use the term lady loosely, jumped in screaming, the fight's on, and I had the party-size fogger because I was downtown at the bar detail, and I sprayed them, and all but 2 of the people decided they had urgent business elsewhere right then. Very effective. But the gel is very effective for inside the church because you don't want the spray because that can affect people. And if you have somebody with oxygen, bad things. Batons. I'm a baton instructor, or I used to. My certification has lapsed. But batons, Even if you're using it properly, say a leg strike, no, stop, down. Doesn't that look horrible? Absolutely. Looks like you're beating the person with a stick. Well, you kind of are. It also takes a lot of training to be effective with that. 31 years as a police officer, I used my baton on one human. It was effective. It's a great door knocker. But in recent, past 6 months or so, the Colorado Springs Police Department, we no longer carry batons. We've got other tools. We've got the pepper spray. We've got the taser. Less lethal. Yes, ma'am.
Is that the PR-24?
PR-24 is what we started off with. And then we went to a side handle collapsible baton and then just a straight baton. So I've been an instructor on all three. But it does take training, and when you're using it, it looks horrible, even if you're using it appropriately. Notice I am reaching down to where it would be a leg strike, not a head strike. Head strike would be a lethal tool. And then the other question is going to be in terms of what equipment do you carry? You want a radio, maybe you want to carry first aid kits. I carry a tourniquet with me. And how much can your team wear and keep concealed? It's hard to conceal a baton, even an expandable one. What I recommend for teams, for safety teams, is I do recommend a good quality semi-automatic firearm in a good quality holster with a backup reload and a small canister of pepper spray that can just fit into the pocket. I could be wearing those, and if TSA had let me bring anything that looks like that, and you wouldn't see it on me. It's not obtrusive. You want a radio for them. But how much can they carry concealed, and how much can you train on? And pepper spray, a practice canister and a canister you carry that are identical except for the contents, and the practice canister is blue, it's about $20. Very, very inexpensive. If you're going to have an unarmed team, at least let them carry pepper spray to have something to defend themselves and others with. When you're developing that team, absolutely you have to develop that team with the support of your church leadership. And I think I'm talking to mainly church leaders here. You've got to have that support as a team. You want to recruit qualified people. People send us, law enforcement, military, firefighters, medical people, first responders, active, retired, doesn't matter. But you really, if you don't have any of those in your congregation, you really just need a person with the right kind of mindset. I've got a guy on my team, he carries a weapon, he's proficient with it, pepper spray and all that. Rocket scientist, literally a rocket scientist. But, he's not been a first responder, but he has the mindset to do it. So as long as you've got a person with the mindset, and then screening interviews. You want to screen the person, okay? I don't want a person on my team that comes in and tells me, I got my 1911 here, I got my 380 compact on my ankle here, and I got this knife, and I got my rifle in the car. That's nice. Or the neighbor my church dealt with, he likes to patrol Manitou Springs on the west side of our town. He did not like it when we honked our horns doing parking lot service. Let us know about it. But he likes to patrol Manitou Springs to keep people safe. He wears what he calls, it's a stab vest. It's supposed to stop knives. He has 2 knives strapped to it. He wears a gun belt with a full-size pistol and a 32-inch broadsword. He tells me he is a biblical scholar. He tells me he has the ability to call down fire from heaven, and he believes this. And he believes that the sword he has a human soul that is trapped in it, has been trapped for 2,000 years, and won't be released until the metal is broken. Those are his words. How about if you have somebody special like that come? Wow. So, certainly not somebody I want. He offered to help. That's okay, we got it. You stay on your side of the fence, and I don't like how your window has a perfect overview of my entire parking lot for that day. But I'm also very good at articulating when someone is a danger, imminent danger to self or others. As good as I am at that, I could not articulate. He told me he knew the rules of engagement. He apologized for his initial outburst. I can't articulate that he's a danger now. Doesn't mean he won't be a danger next week, but I can't do anything about him having those weapons. So we came up with a plan to reluctant, but came up with a plan to deal with him. But for your team, you want the reluctant warrior. This is the person, I carry because I want to keep myself, the ones I love, and the people around me safe. The world's getting crazy. I want to keep people safer, and I want to get training. And somebody maybe has had some training. You don't want Rambo, you want the guy that's the reluctant warrior. When you develop your team, you're looking for resources. You can find them locally. Start off with your police department. Had a conversation with Eric. Some of the police agencies, I do have to say, you get what you pay for. Police agencies that cannot pay very well do tend to attract people that can't get paid better. It's kind of a fact of life. But using the agency collectively, you're still going to have access to some good training with that agency, I think. Or a close agency, but work with them, do a crime prevention survey, get it started off that way. Fire departments, they can help you review fire safety in your facility. Shooting ranges, a lot of shooting ranges offer training, and you want somebody that's trained. Faith-based security network, I've got a handout that we'll make available to folks afterwards, and this document can be emailed to folks that are watching the live stream, or you can go to fbsnamerica.com. That's a good resource. It's a national group for faith-based security network. It talks about developing, organizing, training, and some intelligence information you get for safety teams on a national basis. Insurance company. I don't remember which insurance company Methodist churches have. I think it's Church Mutual. They have some resources. Brotherhood Mutual has better resources for as far as church safety. If Church Mutual is watching, you could learn something. You've got some more resources, in my not so humble opinion. We also have Methodist Church resources. Now, some of these resources are contradictory and maybe useful, maybe not, but at least it's information. I want you to think. Some of the information in terms of responding to violence is, we'll post a sign, no weapons allowed. To me, that's a nice thought, but the person that wants to come and commit violence is going to look at that sign, and instead of saying no weapons allowed, that person's going to read that sign literally as this is a target-rich environment that can't shoot back at me. There are people in the church that are much nicer than I am that would like to see a peaceful world, and you know what? I would like to see it, but right now, we might be able to get there in the future. Maybe. Human nature being what it is, it's going to take us a while. In the sheep. I never read anywhere that Jesus said, feed my sheep to the wolves, and it's the wolf that wants to come in the door. For your team, you've got to have a standard operating procedure. Got to have it. Keep it simple. I have seen plans for churches that approach 200 pages. They talk about how to deal with an active shooter, how to deal with a lost child, how to deal with lots of different things. That's a little much for one volunteer to absorb. My plan may be on the too simple side. It's only 4 pages. But I do training on active shooter, on first aid, on fires, on EDPs, on de-escalation. I just don't incorporate that as part of the procedure because, that's training, and the procedures are basically, you want to keep those fairly simple. Update the plan when you find issues with it. I've updated my plan several times, minor issues. Train your plan, make sure your team knows it, and keep your insurance company involved. Church Mutual will insure your armed safety team. They insure ours. We have some things that we have to do, background check on on our team members. They want a copy of the SOP. They've not commented on my copy of the SOP, but whenever I update it, I send them to them. So apparently they're happy. But keep your insurance company covered, and cover your people and your church. Train regularly. We train monthly in my team. I don't have everybody come every month. We all have lives, but train regularly. You have a goal of doing it monthly, and then get it as often as you can. Review the plan, your SOP. I review my SOP and my use of force laws for Colorado. I do that once a year, January and February. I want to do that because my team members, I am telling these people, you have permission to carry a firearm and OC spray in this church and use it at your judgment. I need to make sure I have trained them to know, okay, what does Colorado law allow on that? If we have somebody that comes to a church and starts bashing out the windows with a sledgehammer because they're unhappy, they don't like the church, having a brown rug out there, whatever reason. It only doesn't make sense to them. We can use force to stop somebody from causing damage in Colorado. But if they've got a sledgehammer, is it worth risking that armed encounter? Because can a sledgehammer be a weapon against a person? To stop them. Church has insurance. We're going to tell the person, stop what you're doing. We're going to move our congregation away from wherever they're doing that. Stop what you're doing, the police are doing, but are we going to physically stop this guy, grab the sledgehammer? No. That way when the responding officers get there, maybe he's used the sledgehammer enough, he's tired. They can administer some electroshock therapy if needed, and then take him away. And but we've got the priority of life. And property, yeah, you can use force to defend property, but there is a lane. Just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean that you should. But I don't tell my team that we will not use force to defend property. I'm struggling for the word, but basically something that has no discretion in it. What is the word I'm looking for? But basically no variation from this policy. Okay, anytime you have that, it's like we will not allow students to bring weapons in schools. Sounds like a good policy. Then you have your ROTC student with the drill rifles getting arrested, or the honor student with the 6-inch knife in her car. The school wants her arrested because the 6-inch long knife, it's a butter knife that she used as a screwdriver. Okay, no discretion, zero tolerance. Zero tolerance rules. There's always going to be that one weird thing that comes out and it's like, I never thought of that. So I'm wary of zero tolerance things. But regularly train. Regularly cover those use of force laws. If you're armed, qualify at least twice annually. The FBSN has a recommended course of fire that's been designed for church safety teams. I helped design it. If you're armed, practice and drill as often as you can. Practicing and drilling is different from qualification. Train with your first aid kit, EAED. Conduct scenario-based training. Who here ushers a lot? Is there anybody here that ushers? Okay. May I pick on you? Okay. So you're the usher at the church, and we'll go to that scenario that I talked about before. We've got somebody in the church, they're in sanctuary, young military veteran, he looks upset. He's just gone out to the restroom that was over there, I think. And so you can wonder what's going on, and then you hear a single gunshot in the restroom. What do you do? I like that. He said call 911 first, okay? If you've got a safety team, I always want, before you go and encounter something, or go to confront something, bring a friend. 911 is a friend. You want to call 911. Now the next question you got is what? What do you do with the gunshot? Do you go into the restroom? Some would say yes, some would say no. I would say it depends. I haven't given you enough information. What if you hear the person say, help me? Maybe you go in. What if you hear, say you're an armed team and you hear a person say, man, don't shoot me again. I'm going to kill you. Now do we go in? Or if you hear silence. Priority of life is going to be the congregation, the safety team member, and the person that's the source of the problem. If I'm hearing silence in that restroom, I know that in suicides, sometimes people will fire that first shot as a test shot to see if it's working. Seen it. I don't want to walk in and get shot. Or he can't quite do it, so now he's going to make me do it. Suicide by cops, suicide by... I'm going to wait for the officers to get here. They've got ballistic vests. They've got a shield. But if there's something like, help me, don't shoot me again, I'm going to have to make a decision then. Do I go in? And do I intervene? Thank you for letting me pick on you. So practice and drill. Train your first aid kit, scenario-based training. Have a budget for training. I don't say the church should buy the team members firearms or ammunition, but if you can support training, let's do that. Training resources, faith-based security network. I'll show you the slide from their webpage. National network, sheepdog security. Sheepdogs guard the flock. Training exercises. Invite your local law enforcement agency to come in and do an active shooter drill in your church. You'll learn something. We did. And laser ammo smokeless range, firearms training without shooting an actual firearm. I have a laser pistol range in my basement. It's awesome. It's improved my tactics. It's improved my firearms skills. It's a lot of fun. But it also has some scenarios, shoot, don't shoot training that I use with my team. And I take on the road and I train other teams. So with Faith-Based Security Network, this is the website. They've got members in 46 states. I'm on the board as of last week. We provide training resources, organizational resources. If there's somebody going around causing problems at churches, we get that. And they've got some localized things. We've been warned about a couple of people that were local to Colorado Springs causing problems in churches. Sheepdog Church Security, they've got some downloadable resources, and some of their instructors will travel. With laser ammo smokeless range, $600 in software, about $400 for a laser pistol, a little more than that for a good quality computer or projector. If you've got an area 10 by 30 and a good screen, you've got enough room to do training with that. And that shoot, don't shoot training is invaluable for safety teams. I've done that a lot with people, and just giving the idea of, giving commands over a firearm. If you've ever gone to a firing range, and who here's been to a shooting range? A couple of you. Have you ever heard anybody saying, drop the weapon in a range? You're going to attract attention. That's just weird. People don't do that at a range. In my training, I have people do that at shoot and don't shoot targets. They're having to decide whether to shoot or decide not to shoot, while telling, it's like, I'm security, I'm looking for the guy with the gun. I had one guy that got so tied up, I'm security, I'm the guy with the gun. It was hilarious at the time. But imagine this person having never done this. Do you think he maybe practiced or thought about it at least? If you've at least thought about it, you're ahead of most people. So this is a very good resource. But there's a lot of resources out there. But safety teams, they can be armed or unarmed, depending on the philosophy of your church. Both can be effective. They address violence, fire, medical, weather, emergencies at your facility. You've got to have a plan. You've got to screen them. You really, really, really should insure them. And practice the plan and train with the tools. You want to let them have that lethal tool and that less lethal tool. Because you're going to use the less lethal tool most, but the tool you'll use the most, the tool my team has used the most, the gray matter between the ears and this. We have talked some EDPs down. I spent some quality time talking to our neighbor with the broadsword. I have held his broadsword. Didn't really want to, but he wanted to show it to me. But we did it, and I engineered our contact so that it was as safe as I could be, and I had a physical barrier in between us. He didn't see me arranging that, but that's part of the tactics you learn in doing your training. So practice that and train with the tools. So questions? Yes, sir.
Is there any policy in the Methodist Church or in the Big Sky Conference, Mountain Sky Conference, dealing with a pastor being armed and part of the team?
Okay.
In a little church, for instance,
Yeah.
the pastor definitely has the best range of visibility.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So the question, if you don't hear it on the live stream, is there any policy within the Methodist Church on pastor being armed and part of the team? Not that I'm aware of. I'm really not aware of any policy within the discipline or anything else that says anything about armed teams or unarmed teams. It might be a good idea to develop something like that. It would be controversial. But I'm not aware of any type of policy. And you said the pastor does have the best view of the congregation. Yes. And the pastor has often been the target of the violence there. Pastor's also going to be distracted. There's this thing called a sermon you guys got to think about. And I know pastors tend to have a reputation of being exhausted Sunday afternoons. But if your pastor has the right mindset and training, okay. Okay. Yeah. And
We're in a church where a community where most of the people are armed.
yeah. And well, speaking of, you're in a community where most of the people are armed. If you have no intentional team, but you know you've got in your safety team for active shooters, depending on, well, I know I've got Fred and Joe and and Martha and somebody else over there, and I know they carry. Do you know what kind of training they've had? Do they know that they've got that weapon? You could have that awkward moment where you've got, okay, we've had the shooter, we addressed it, now, okay, I've got a gun, you got a gun, I don't know you, you don't know me. Are you a good guy or a bad guy? And you've got to decide like that. I can't snap my fingers today. Do it. We have had tragedies. In Denver, there was a man, concealed carrier, citizen, stopped an active killer. Hero picked up the active killer's weapon, maybe to get it away from the body as the officers were arriving. The hero died. What a nightmare for the whole thing. What a nightmare for the officer. It's like, active shooter, I've got him, I've took him down, and then you find out he's the man that stopped it. How do you deal with that? What a nightmare. In the video I showed there, they picked up briefly the shotgun from the shooter, but then they set it down. I don't know what happened, and I haven't had the opportunity to ask them what happened when police arrived on scene, how many awkward moments there were. There were at least 8 people in that congregation that came out with guns, and I could see a variety of levels of training for those 8 people. But you've got to know what to do. Part of the team training I do is make sure after you've done this, okay, if you've got it, as soon as you possibly can, preferably before the police with guns arrive, holster it. You do not want to have a gun in your hand, because as a police officer, my active shooter training is the most lethal training I have attended as a cop. I am on a search and destroy mission. If you have a gun in your hand, it needs to be really, really obvious you're a good guy, or else bad things will happen and happen fast. So, does that answer your question?
One other follow-up question. You mentioned a couple times concealed weapons.
Yes.
On that team. Is there any deterrent or any reason to be concealed rather than not concealed?
It's a personal preference. I think, and I'm coming from, it depends on the culture of your church. If open carry is standard in your community, that type of thing, maybe it's okay. In Colorado Springs, where I'm at, I'm very cool to the idea of open carry. The first thing, at least in my community, when I see somebody that is engaging in open carry, I immediately question their judgment. Are they carrying that because they are a sheepdog, or are they carrying that to make a fashion statement? Something that helps me determine that is, what's their equipment look like? I have seen some pretty terrible holsters, and it's like, okay. So now I know, okay, that's a lousy holster. This guy's had no training. Does he have a backup reload? Nope. This guy has probably had no training and whatnot. I do like them for one thing, though. If a bad thing happens, I can use them to draw fire while I address the problem. I'm not cynical at all, am I? Yes, sir.
Well, that's a question I have. Well, I mean, say we see somebody in our congregation, let's be clear about that, I have done a firearms.
Uh-huh.
We see someone like that, like this.
Yes.
And we also see when someone else is agitated,
Mm-hmm.
do we address the one who knows back, or do we remove the one that's agitated?
That's a good question. Are you talking you're talking about seeing somebody you know is
I just was going to ask, is part of your training, does it show us how to recognize an incident before it happens, or if there are signs of something that's about to happen that we should have?
Yeah, you may have in terms of recognizing signs of someone who's agitated, life experience, and some of the things you see. When you start watching people, you can tell when somebody is agitated. I mean, if I'm in a group or whatnot, and there's a disturbance in a crowd or somebody angry and whatnot, it attracts my attention immediately. It drives my wife nuts sometimes. As all of a sudden I'm focusing on people that are uneasy or arguing or having some kind of problem. Looks like they're in pain or upset. They'll get my focus quickly. The person that's open carrying, I see that. And I sit with my back to the door usually. But those are things you can address in training. And now when you've got somebody that's agitated, if they're agitated and openly carrying a firearm, that can be a very dangerous thing. If they're openly carrying a firearm and they're going to be agitated at your approach, that can be a dangerous thing. It might be a good thing to have a policy. With my church, we don't have it posted, and there's no legal requirement to post it in Colorado, is we don't allow open carry in our church. That was one thing that my neighbor with the stab vest, no, we don't allow open carry. You're going to freak people out. I told him that. Yeah, I'm carrying everything. Yes, you are. But we would ask somebody respectfully, say, sir, open carry just really doesn't happen here. You're going to distract people from what's going on at church and scare some people in this community. Can you please secure your weapon in your vehicle? We've got people to watch the parking lot, so it should be safe. And hopefully, since you open carry, you know that there's places you can't have. Hopefully, you've got a gun safe in your car that you can secure it properly. Ask them politely. But if you're approaching somebody who's armed, it's a good idea. It's a good idea to have a friend with you who also is armed, because you just never know. I hope I've answered your question. It's a judgment call based on the totality of the circumstances.
I've talked to people that have seen them carry them before in public places.
Mm-hmm.
When I approach them, I can't help but approach them and say, I realize you're packing a firearm.
Mm-hmm.
Are you willing to use that?
Mm-hmm.
Suffer the consequences thereafter.
Uh-huh.
That's a question they're asking, so can you put that on?
Yeah. 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 I'm not sure I would go up to a stranger in public and make that confrontation. Okay. But if it was in my church, I'd certainly make that approach and say, that's not what we do here. So, all righty. So we've got the hand out there, and I think, I've gone over time.
That's quite all right. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, everybody.
Really appreciate that very much.
And I'm sure my contact information is available if people have questions. I do answer my phone when it rings, when it's numbers I don't recognize, because I've had calls actually from Montana and Utah and a few others. So thank you.
Really appreciate your being here. Really appreciate your sharing your expertise with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Very much. And if there are further questions during the break, feel free to have time with Rick. Afternoon. Let's have just say about a 5-minute break. Thank you. We'll have just about a 5-minute break, and then Patty Agnew will be leading us in the next segment. Again, there are refreshments right outside the door, water bottles and snacks, and the bathrooms are just down the hall to your right. If we could gather back here in 5 minutes, so 10 after 2 by this clock, that would be really helpful. Thank you. I am going to go ahead.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. Again, a thanks to Rick for sharing your expertise with us. And now I'd like to welcome Reverend Patty Agnew. In the last few years, we have been blessed to have Patty serve not only the churches of Park County in South Central Montana, but also as the Congregational Resource Minister for Montana East. And in that role, she has shared her gifts with us in working with lay leadership in developing their gifts for ministry, and specifically in the context of worship leadership. So we're asking her this day to share that with us. Thank you, Patty, very much. Really
Thanks.
grateful.
Yeah. Well, it's good to be here. Help me out. Like, raise your hand if you're laity. Oh, I'm so excited you're all here. Okay, this is geared toward laity, so pastors, just enjoy. I mean, it hopefully is helpful information, that, but the whole talk is how do we empower laity for worship? And so that's what we're going to talk about. Oh, I don't have my clicker. Look at that. Okay, this is a quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. You may be familiar with him. He was, I don't know all the exact details, pastor in Nazi Germany, standing up to the Nazi regime, ended up ultimately being imprisoned and killed. He wrote this: "It is by the grace of God that a congregation is permitted to gather visibly in this world to share God's word and sacrament. Not all Christians receive this blessing. The imprisoned, the sick, the scattered lonely, the proclaimers of the... They remember, as the psalmist did, how they went with the multitude to the house of the Lord with the voice of joy and praise, and with a multitude that kept the holy day." So the physical presence of other Christians gathered together for worship is an incomparable source of joy and strength to the believer. Don't we all understand that so much more now after experiencing the pandemic, right? I think we took a lot of that for granted for a long time, but now we understand much more how important it is to gather together, and this is a great gather. We're gathering together in person, and it does our souls well. And so, what do I have? Sorry, I don't necessarily, well, we're just going to keep going. All right, so we do have a renewed sense. And it's not just about quarantine for the pandemic, right? It's your people who are living in care facilities, or for whatever reason, and there are a lot of reasons, can't get out of their house and get to the church, or they feel some kind of risk at any different kind of level to not be able to get to church. So worshiping together is a blessing. So I'm curious, just shout out for me, what is it for you that makes gathering together in worship a blessing? What is the benefit to you, the blessing of it? What do you most enjoy about gathering together for worship? Anybody, just shout it out. Community. Good. The body. Family. I didn't hear that. The music. And what is it about the music that you like? Anybody? Singing. Tradition. And there's something about music, when we all sing together, it gives us a sense of being united and all that we share in that. Sure. Sure, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of studies out there that say attending religious services increases your lifespan, right? There's a lot of benefits for gathering together in worship. Yeah, and so when we gather together for worship, we're, none of us said, but we're praising God, right? That's so there's value in that, making that connection with the living God, and that it feeds our souls and adds meaning to our life. And there's just, and I don't have a good way to put it, but there's just something that happens when we gather together with other people to praise God, right? It's the Holy Spirit, it's the God at work. There's just something that happens that's good. That's good. When we gather together for worship, it's the fellowship, right? That's what we all named, like the value of being with other people and the relationships and the community and all of that. But I think there's also in worship, we have a personal benefit, right? It restores our soul to gather together and worship. But there's also a collective benefit to everybody who gathers. And then from worship, we're sent out in the world to live as disciples of Christ. So all of that's happening. Those are all important parts of worship as we gather together. All right, did you know the Methodist Church has been in decline, sorry, pastors, ever since we required an educated clergy class? So here's some of the statistics. From 1776 to 1850, so 75-ish years, the American Methodist movement grew from 65 congregations to over 13,000. Like, that's an incredible growth, right? 65 to 13,000. That was the era of the local lay pastor, the lay pastors leading Bible studies in their home and all that kind of stuff. After 1950, the movement lost traction because it shifted to an expectation of an educated clergy, a professional, you have to go get an MDiv, all that kind of stuff. So here's the, I don't know what I put up there. Here's a quote from the book where I got this from. "The dramatic metric rise of the Methodists was short-lived. It is instructive to note that the Methodists began to slump at precisely the same time as their amateur clergy were replaced by professionals who claimed episcopal authority over their congregations. So during Methodism's most rapid growth period, laity led the movement." You can find that in many different books. I happen to be reading Cry from the Pew by Kay Cotan. All right. So let me just say, I'm not saying that to diminish the role of clergy. We bring something to the table, right? And our education was valuable, and all of that's good. I think so I'm not trying to diminish the role of clergy. I'm trying to lift up the place of laity. I think laity have a much more important role in the church than sometimes we allow laity to, or laity feel adequate to do, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. So we need to lift up our laity. And so, in fact, in Montana specifically, but not just in Montana, it's becoming clearer and clearer every year that the future vitality of our churches is going to be more and more dependent upon leadership by our laity. Expensive. Local church resources are decreasing, and it's harder and harder. It's just a ton of reasons for that. But we really need to be intentionally developing laity leadership in all of our churches. So I think somehow over time, and again, a lot of reasons, and we don't have to go into all those, but we have become too clergy dependent in our churches, specifically for worship, right? We kind of have this formula for our worship. We sing a few hymns, we say some liturgy, we have a sermon by an educated professional pastor, we take an offering, which is what I always forget, and then we have a blessing. So we've kind of worked ourselves into this form of what worship is. But when you all talked about what's important in worship, relationships are important, singing is important, being empowered to go out in service is important. There's a lot of ways to accomplish those goals, not limited by what we currently do. And so I think we need to expand our mind about what that looks like. So I'm going to tell a quick story that I'm going to tell again tomorrow, but it was relevant today. I thought I threw it in today's presentation. So there's a zoo somewhere, I don't know where, I don't remember the details, there's a zoo somewhere that was smart and put in a children's playground right by the lines where you buy the tickets to get into the zoo. So you're a family going, you're in line for your tickets, and you can send your kids over to play on the playground so they're not, you know, what kids do. So for this family that went, the parents bought the tickets, and then they go get their kids, and they've got a little son who loves to swing, and he's swinging on the swing and just having the best time of his life. And the parents are like, okay, time to go to the zoo. And, you know, the kid had never been to a zoo before. He didn't know what a zoo was. He couldn't see over the wall between where he wanted to be animals, and they're trying to tell him about all the amazing things in the zoo, and all the kid can think is, I'm having fun on the swing. So he just starts, then the tension rises, and he starts holding on tighter and tighter to his swing and just keeps swinging because that's what he wants to do. And then, as I'm sure it was what I would do in this situation, the patience ran out, and finally the parents are like grabbing the kid, like, come on, and peeling his hands off the swing and him into the zoo. I think sometimes we in our churches, we're swinging on the swing. And we are holding on tight to that swing. And there's a whole zoo out there that we could be exploring if we'd just be willing to get off the swing. And that applies in a lot of ways. But in worship, I think we're limited sometimes by the form of what we think worship should be and how it's done and how we put it together. And that there's a whole other world out there of amazing experiences we could have if we're just a little and try some things and trust in the Holy Spirit and work together. That's what we need to be working for. Here's my other. A few years ago, more than and is in UC Santa Barbara. The dorm I was in, there were two 10-floor parents, all day. It was not carried up everything up into my room, up and down the stairwell. And in the process, some students there helping out. So this guy, John Allen, was helping me carrying up my stuff. Then he invited me to a Bible study. Turns out he's a Bible study leader on campus. He was there to help students and be able to invite them to Bible study. Anyways, I'm making this story way too long. He left the floor. We had about 10 students on the floor, and we all were part of this Bible study together. Of people. We were, I mean, from every denomination, you know, there were Bible churches and Protestants, Episcopalians, anything. None of them were trained. Like, I didn't know how to study the Bible, read the Bible more than whatever Sunday school taught me. But we did this Bible study, and it was amazing. It transformed our lives because we had this safe space where we could read Scripture and wrestle with, how then shall we live? Right? These break out on this. Am I going to go? Am I not go? Am I going to drink or am I not going to drink? How am I going to make these decisions? As I'm trying to figure out as a student, who am I apart from the parents and the upbringing I have? I had this amazing small group where we could wrestle with what it means to be a person on this planet, what it means to live as a Christian on this campus. It was an amazing, to the point where we got nicknamed or the Holy Rollers, because everybody knew on Tuesday night we'd be walking down the hallway with our Bibles to John Allen's room. But it wasn't, they weren't being mean about it, like that was just, you know. And next thing you know, the guy that gave us the Holy Roller nickname started asking questions about the Bible and about what we were doing with those Bibles in John Allen's room. And pretty soon we had roommates asking us questions. So within 4 or 5 weeks, we've got a lot of students on our floor asking us questions about Jesus and the Bible and God and what's going on. So we decided to do a Bible study for them. They thought I should lead that. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. But I did. Best Bible study probably I've ever led in my life, because if you ever get a chance to study the Bible with people who aren't Christians and haven't been in church, they're willing to ask the best questions And they're willing to have the hard conversations. And it adds more life to your own faith as you kind of think through that. All that to say, the Holy Spirit met us in those places. And we learned so much in life and in faith. And did we learn some bad theology along the way? Probably, right? We didn't have a professional, educated clergy leading us that had all that kind of training. But you know what? If I think about the sermons I've given across my 20-some years of preaching, my faith has evolved and grown enough. I'm sure there's some bad theology back there in some of my sermons, right? But somehow the Holy Spirit works in and through all of that. And we all learn and grow in faith, and that's what it's all about, right? It's really not about having the perfect theology and learning the exact right thing. It's about learning and growing in faith together and serving God, serving people. All right, those are my stories. So now I got to crack through this stuff. Okay, so all that to say, let's empower laity to lead worship and get out beyond some of our constraints we put on ourselves in our imagination. And so to lead worship, you don't have to be an expert at anything to lead worship. You don't have to be an expert at anything to preach a sermon. They say everybody's got one sermon in them. They probably have more. But, you all know some stuff. You've lived life. You've experienced God. All a sermon is sharing that, right? That's what that is about in worship. To share, to talk about the Bible is not to understand the full depths of it and know it all. It's really more about asking questions and thinking about that. To preach is simply to testify to your life experience with God. And so, we used to talk about this in one of my churches, maybe. Hey, Russ, can you help me out? It's not going. I just need it. There we go, that one. Thanks. Must go to sleep or something. Okay, so when I'm up here leading worship, am I leading worship or am I the lead worshiper? That's an interesting thing to talk about. And there's, so in my opinion, we need to be the lead worshiper. Like, I need to be up front leading. Praise teams, choirs, people leading prayers. We need to be authentically doing those things and then inviting the whole community in the room to join us in that, right? So leading worship to me is more about performance, whereas being the lead worshiper is more about, come on this journey with me for this next period of time. So that can be a helpful kind of empowering thing to recognize that when you stand up here, you need to just worship yourself and allow people into that. And it takes some of the pressure off of what you're doing. Okay, so I'm not a good graphic designer. So if anybody wants to help me out, like this is a 3D, I need a 4D graphic. And here's why. So when we're putting, now you're a layperson, and now you're going to put a worship service together. And what does that look like? How do we put worship services together? So I think along these lines of 4D worship. So there's the vertical aspect, right? So we're connecting with God in worship. What are ways we can do that? How can we connect with God in worship? Through prayer, through, as we're singing, remembering that we're singing to God. There's a lot of different ways we can connect with God in worship. So there's that vertical component in worship. And then there's the horizontal. There's the community aspect of worship. And so we're engaging in relationships with one another. We're sharing together as a family. I'm going to go and detail some of these as we go along, but right now I'm giving you the overview. So how are we in relationship with one another in worship? And then I think there's an internal arrow, right? So when I'm in worship, I'm receiving healing. It's good for my soul. There's things that go on internally for me as I'm worshiping in a group. And so there's that component. and then the external, right? So worship's great, but if all we ever do is come together and worship, it's like the old Amy Grant song, Fat Babies. Anyone know that song? She has a song about, for people at all, you know the song? Fat babies. I think that's what she calls it, something like that. Anyway, Amy Grant just talks about if all we ever do is sit on the pews on Sunday morning and never live out our faith outside these walls, we just become fat babies. Now that I say that, it might not, it's something like that. Someone look it up for me. Anyways, it's an old song. I've been doing this for a long time. So part of worship is the gathering together with the purpose to be sent out. Am I right, fat babies? Yay, Angie knows. Yeah. So in worship, part of worship again is to get out as well. It's not just about how it benefits me individually. It's not just about us getting together relationally. It's not even just about connecting with God, but all of that propels us out in the world to love our neighbor and serve in the world. So now let's talk about, we all have our typical templates that are probably something like call to worship, opening hymn, prayer time, offering, sermon, response of, maybe of sacrament. How this lines up with what's in the John Wesley's order of worship, whatever, in the hymnal. So just go with me on this. So I think the first thing we do when we get together is we have a call to worship. And what that means to me is everybody shows up at church, they're all walking around, they're talking to friends, or they're sitting in their pew, we're all kind of waiting. At some point, you have to have a moment and say, let's get this thing started. Let's all gather together. Let's draw our attention together with one another and draw our attention to God. And it's the invitation to join together in worship. So we need to have something that does that. So there's a lot of ways to gather people into the presence of God, right? So, and our hymnal has a lot of resources, but you might ring the church bell. My church just remembered that they have this church bell, and we've got some kids that found that out. So now that's the little ritual, is that these kids get lifted up by, Lee lifts up the kids so they can ring the church bell. That's a great way to get started. We light candles, right? That's another good way to get started. There's probably some verbal invitation. So you might have a call to worship, responsive reading thing. If you don't have resources for all that, there's resources online. There's a lot of stuff in the hymnal. Pick a psalm. You can always choose a psalm and alternate reading verses or say it all together, whatever. There's a lot of ways that you can gather people together and kind of draw your attention to one another. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it, right? It's simple. That's all it has to be. And then I like to follow that call to worship with a song, because there is something about a song that draws us all together. And I like to try to do some kind of song that's like a praise song. It doesn't have to be a chorus with the drums. There's a whole front section of the hymnal that's all about praising who God is. And so I like to start with that, because that's, we're gathering together and drawing attention to God. So all of that is the horizontal and vertical to get started. Other ideas, other ways you guys kind of start your worship service that are ways you like to do? Traditions you might have in your congregations? A prelude, yeah. And that's part of gathering together. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You have an opening song we always do.
Yeah, so that any of those rituals where you do the same thing every week, those can be really helpful, because it kind of even tells your body, like, okay, it's time, we're having a centering song. So what they said was they have the same song they sing every week to start with as a call to worship, a centering song. Yeah. There's a lot of things you can do. And then I do what I call the family time next. That's the announcements, right? And I still do hate announcements sometimes. That's the big question. Like, where do you put announcements? Do you put them at the beginning, but then everybody's late and they don't hear it? Do you put it at the end? Well, everyone's tuning out and, whatever. So it's always hard to figure out where to put those announcements. But when I figured out that really that's family time, that kind of helped me. And there's certainly better ways to give announcements than others. You know, I was in one church, oh my God, this is a long time ago, but they would have an opening hymn, and they would say, anyone who has an announcement, come up, and after the opening hymn, you can give your announcement. Typically, there'd be 5 or 6 people lined up, and then they'd give their 10-second to 10-minute announcement. That was not a good method in my mind. But anyways, so that if you think of that announcement as, what does everybody need to know? Like, what's important? And you don't have to tell everybody everything, but there's always a few things. And so I look at that as doing that in a way that's building our family. It's communication, it's important communication. How are we doing that? Yeah, oh, and then also in this would be, and I don't know how you've adapted to COVID or just life with flu and all that kind of stuff. Like, a lot of churches used to have a greeting time, right? Where you shake hands with some people around you. And that may or may not be a good thing to do anymore. But what can you do to help people connect with the people they're worshiping with, right? Make eye contact. I don't know what it is, but do something to help recognize and deepen that connection that people have with one another during worship. And then, the idea just went out of my brain. Oh, a transition, I think. So then joys and concerns also falls in this, right? I used to hate joys and concerns too, but I've come around on that. So, and there's times and places they work better than others. But, right, joys and concerns is that transition from horizontal to vertical, because we're hearing the concerns of people. We're finding out what's on their hearts. What can we celebrate together? What are the concerns we share? And then we go to God in prayer with those. So these, there's these 4 dimensions, but they're all intertwined with each other. It's not a progressive linear step. We do all of it and all of it. Any other traditions you like in your services that's that family time, that's connecting with one another, things you do with that part?
I went to a church here in town when I was looking around, and it was a Methodist church. And at the greeting time, small church, so it worked really well, but instead of just greeting, you can pray through this week.
Oh, okay.
Just a incredible connection, and
Yeah.
you learn about that person and vice versa in a very short period of time.
Yeah, good. So she said in the greeting time they were instructed to say, how can I pray for you this week, and share that. And so a guided greeting time can be really good. Like, there might be a question that's relevant to your sermon or something like that. And also encouraging people, like, shake 5 people's hands, or go find someone you don't know, or don't just talk to these, whatever. So there's ways you can really encourage people to kind of get out of their own little shell. So, yeah. All right. Okay, then a prayer time, right, is mostly the vertical part, but the internal part as well, because it's both of those. And so what can that look like? How do we lead a prayer time in a worship service kind of setting? You have the joys and concerns. You'll have a Lord's Prayer. You might have a time of silence. And then typically it's like a pastor's, one voice prayer, where one person gives a prayer. And I think that's kind of where sometimes laity feel inadequate. No need to. There's actually books of prayers. So if you're leading worship and you feel uncomfortable about that, like, there's a bunch of them in the hymnal. You'd be amazed how many resources are in the hymnal. Or find a prayer you like online or in a book or something like that. So it's easy to find resources to help you offer a prayer. But you know what? Here's the truth of it. All prayer is talking to God, right? So it doesn't have to be eloquent. You may want to write it down before, you may not. The Holy Spirit will work. If it's extemporaneous, the Holy Spirit will work a week ahead of time, if you're a week ahead of time. I can't tell you how many times I've had, like I think of what my sermon's going to be about like 6 weeks ahead. I don't know, Kelly's like 9 months ahead on her planning. And then the day comes and the week comes and something happens in the world, and that message is so relevant that you picked 8 weeks ago. So the Holy Spirit can work whether we're extemporaneously talking or whether we've planned it ahead. And so yeah, feel free to not have perfect language, to not make it all these and thous and sound fancy. You know, it's just talking to God, whatever that looks like. And then the inspiration or the word part, right? So let's talk about, obviously there's the classic sermon, and lay people can write a sermon just like ordained clergy can. Anybody can write a sermon. But what else could be done besides your typical sermon? How can we engage Scripture? Read the lectionary texts and ask some questions. Have people share. I've got 2 congregations that love that. I've got 1 congregation that hates it. So you'll just know who your people are. But you don't have to present all the information. Like, worship's better when it's interactive and when people are participating. And it's amazing to me when I'll ask a question. Like recently I don't know what my sermon is on, but the question was, who was somebody in your life that kind of taught you faith? And what was that about? And people shared the most amazing stories, right? They didn't have to prepare for that. They didn't get nervous about it. They just shared that. And maybe that's what you share if you're ever given a chance to give a message, right? Just share about any of those kind of stories. What do I got here? You could do the Lectio Divina, where you take a scripture and you read it several times and allow space and time for people to respond. You could do an Ignatius study, which I've got somewhere in my files. I could not find it when I was preparing for this. So if you want more of all these resources, like email me. I should have put that up there, pagnew@mountainskyumc.com.org. That's something. So if you want some of these specific resources, contact me and I will find them and I will send them to you. But think also about the sermon time being a time of testimony. That can be an intimidating word, but it doesn't have to be. What can you give testimony about? We did a service one time where the person speaking was we had an organ donor and an organ recipient share their stories. That was a powerful worship service, right? There's just the possibilities are endless. The zoo has a lot of crazy animals in it, right? And we're sitting on our swings. And so and part of that's learning the stories of each other, right? And have people share about their moms. How did their moms raise them up in the faith? What did that look like for them? That could be or dads. I don't mean to single out moms, but like on a Mother's Day, have people talk about their moms and what they learned about from their moms or whatever. Or you could do the hymns. It's pretty easy, and there's books and online, and actually on the Methodist Board of Discipleship has this information. You can learn the story behind the hymn, like who wrote the hymn and what was their inspiration and that kind of thing. And so you could look that kind of thing up. You could also ask people, what's your favorite hymn and why? I've had wonderful worshiping experiences sharing that. Everybody be prepared to share what your favorite hymn is and tell us why.
I'm just thinking about, we had a pastor recently who set up almost like a talk show sort of format, and then interviewed different people, and maybe she interviewed a lifelong member of the church.
Mm-hmm.
Interviewing
people in your congregation that have all different kind of stories and learning that from all ages, right? Yeah, that's a great way to do that. Yeah. And then you could do a hymn sing. You can always do that, the classic hymn sing where people just yell out the number that they want and you sing it. And you have to have a good pianist to do that, and not the layperson in one of my churches who every time that happened, he would call out the hymn that it's got frenzied spirit, like the silencing the frenzied Yeah. Nobody knew that hymn. He just thought it was the funniest thing, and he'd always make us sing it. Like, it was so obnoxious. So, because of that, I don't like that kind of hymn sing, but I love hymn sings because hymns reach into our hearts, right? And so I like to construct them. So I might ask ahead of time what people's favorite songs are, and then I'll intersperse those with scriptures, because it's really easy to connect a scripture verse with a hymn. And you can do that. So you're alternating reading a scripture and singing a hymn. That's what we do. That's what I'm doing Sunday with the Passion. We're reading through the Passion, and we'll sing some hymns interspersed. I've done it with the life of Jesus. So we start with the birth of Jesus and sing Silent Night, and then work through some of the significant events in his life and tie in some of the hymns that go with that along the way. So there's a lot of different ways to put together hymns and scriptures. Yeah.
In the Methodist hymnal,
Mm-hmm.
at the bottom of the hymn, sometimes it gives the Bible verses in there.
Yep. Yeah. And in the back of the hymnal is an index by scripture. So if you know you're going to do certain whatever, you can see if there's a hymn tied to it or not. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Again, there's so much in that hymnal. Yeah. What else do I have here? Yeah. So you could think kind of timeline, like tell a story when you felt closest to God and have people share that, or farthest from God. And how did you get close to God again? Or there's just, again, the possibilities are endless. And then there's also, one of the blessings of COVID is most of us pastors now are recording our sermons in some fashion, and we have a whole boatload of digital sermons. And so any one of us, you might want to ask permission, but probably you don't need to. Go on Facebook page, go on websites. There's Anywhere Church, which is also a good resource for hymns and sermons that are there. But most of us pastors in here, we've got some recorded sermons these days. And so, lay people can plug and play those too.
What was that?
Anywherechurch.com. And so you have to have a CCLI license, but it's free. It's a Mountain Sky conference. Dave Merkel has put together and curated a bunch of hymns and sermons and liturgy and all of that. So you go on that website. You have to put in your CCLI license number to get your account. It's free, but you got to have that. And then you have access to all that stuff. There's probably 100 sermons on there. Yeah. Okay, then so whatever your inspiration word moment looks like, and then it's the response. So offering, prayer, commitment, sacraments, you might read a creed, another hymn. You intersperse hymns throughout this whole thing. You might have silence, or you might get creative and have people doodle, do some coloring, do some kind of artsy way to respond. A lot of people really think that way, and that can be really helpful too. And some kind of response. And then often in the message time, you might be trying to inspire people to a certain action. And so what does that look like? And I use the offering a lot for that. Like I'll have people write down a commitment they want to make and then put that in the offering plate as well as their gifts if they have them. Or it's just a great way to make a commitment and offer it to God. So there's that. I'm rushing now because I'm running out of time. And then the blessing, right? Send people out with a blessing. Make it clear you're sending them out into the world to love the world. And what does that look like? And you might have a favorite little song you sing for that. Or sometimes churches have a verse up on the back of the wall as they walk out. Some way we had a call and responsive thing that the kids would come light the Christ candle, and then we would, as a congregation, say, Christ is leading us out into the world. So there's a lot of different things you can put together for that. So, all that to say, anybody can do any of that, right? And your pastor can help you if you need that. Your pastor has resources that can give you. So if you're a lay person, I would just really encourage you to experiment with this. If you're a pastor, I'd encourage you to do some lay-led Sundays when you're present. So it doesn't always have to be when you're gone, right? Who wouldn't want a week when you don't have to write a sermon? You can get some work done. So, and there might be, there might be times like you might strategically do that the Sunday after Easter, perhaps, or the week you get back from vacation or annual conference or whatever, right? So clergy are tired right now, more so than ever, and we need some time off, right? And so laity, don't be afraid. Get off the swing and go explore the zoo. There's a lot of great stuff out there, and you'll be amazed how God works in you when you do that, right? It's the John 6. Jesus wanted to feed the crowd. A little boy offered a small lunch. Jesus took that and blessed it and multiplied and fed the crowd. And so whatever you have to offer to God, God will take and bless and multiply and feed the crowd. That's the way our God operates. And so be empowered, laity, to lead worship. Be a lead worshiper as you gather for worship together. Amen. All right, I have 2 minutes. Who's got a question? Okay, have a break. Yeah, thanks for being here, and take a break.
For sharing your gifts with us and empowering lay folk to lead worship. If you will take just about 7 minutes and we'll start at 3 o'clock, that would be great. And remember that there are snacks out there right on the counter and restrooms down the hall to your right as you go out the sanctuary. And again, we'll start about 3 o'clock. If you can all find your way back in so that we can get started again, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you, out of appreciation and respect for our leaders this day.
Can move the chairs a little bit, but if you would please find a few friends or new friends, and that will prepare us for our time together. So just a few moments, 3 or 4 more people, bring your chairs together, and we'll have a conversation together. Thank you. Thank you so much. So while you're doing that, I'm going to share across racial, and then also around equity, inclusion, and diversity, and anti-racism. As a conference, we don't have that many cross-racial appointments, but we have color to support any of that. I believe that cultural curiosity is the foundation for any of that kind of work. Is that capacity to seek commonalities and to recognize diversity, and how do we bridge across those spaces, right? I just heard a wonderful story. There's this family that has a toddler. They went to the zoo, and the boy is sitting and swinging. Those of you who missed that story, let me know, or Patty. But I love that image just because we don't know what we don't know. And that fear of not knowing, stepping into the unknown, there's a whole zoo that we can experience. And I think intercultural competency and curiosity is that kind of work, right? So thanks, Patty. I will also say part of worship is borrowing things from other people. So all respect to Patty. And, so let's talk about pasta and noodles. This is your first task. I'm Vietnamese American. My parents are from Vietnam. Some of you may remember in the late 70s, early 80s, the boat people from Vietnam. After the war, many churches sponsored families. My parents were a part of that story and history. I was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and grew up there. So noodles, the first picture you see up there is a Vietnamese noodle bowl. Bún thịt nướng, right? So that, I literally had it a couple days ago. But then I also love spaghetti and Alfredo and Parmesan cheese, and I also love ramen, and I also, you know. So in your group, just spend a few moments. A noodle that is part of your family, or a noodle that you love, or pasta. What is that noodle or pasta that comes to mind when you think of noodle? Spaghetti for us. Keep going. Don't. Yep. All right, how are we doing? Are we getting hungry? Just a few more seconds.
Oh, thank you. I will take
Thank you. Can I leave this with you? All right. Any thoughts that you came up as you're listening and sharing? Anything came up besides hunger? Anything that came up for you besides hunger? Anything came up in your conversation? What was that?
White appropriation
Oh.
does not make good eats.
What do you want? You want to say more about that?
We cooked pasta
Oh. I bet your pasta is really good, Margaret.
Compared to my mother's, yes. Compared to yours.
Oh, you're too kind. The activity here, and one that you can bring back to your communities, when it's either you're talking about pasta or bread. My family went on spring break last week to California, and we visited a town, Solvang, which, yes, first time there. Yeah. And we were talking, every culture has some sort of fried dough, right? And so the activity here is the reminder that there's commonalities and there's difference. And we constantly have to move between those. And so whether it's about food or anti-racism, there's commonalities and unique differences. And how do we find the commonalities that bring us together and recognize the diversity of voices, to honor those voices, right? And to hear those views and see dignity in the other when there's opposing views, right? So let's have pasta together sometime. Let's see. Oh boy, it's not moving. All right, the next activity I have for you, I would like you to do is you have your sticky notes and your pens. I would love you to brainstorm with your group all the places in the Bible that strangers or persons across difference interact, okay? So just put one, tear it off, put another one, tear it off, put it, just think of all the time. So for example, Moses and the 3 visitors, remember when they came, they say, you're gonna be a father, right? Remember the story of the Good Samaritan? So just 3 minutes. As you do that, I'm gonna invite you to come over to this wall. I'm gonna ask you to come over to this wall and post starting from the Old Testament, from this side, all the way to the New Testament. Wherever your sticky notes can be, just post them on here, okay? You can work as a team, you can write your own. I would encourage you to work together. There is not a competition. There is a competition. We're all winners. We're all winners. Friends who are joining us online, feel free to jot down on your paper as well, on a sheet of paper, the stories that come up when differences come together, people of difference come together. Huh? Yes, please put on the wall, starting with the Old Testament in the far left, moving towards the Old Testament to the right. Now, because I'm not very tall, I'm going to need you to put them down a little lower for me so I can read them. Mr. Kelly, Reverend, you got me? You got my back. Thank you. Maybe 2 more minutes. How are we doing? Do you need more time, or? I'm going to invite you to start having some members in your group to go up and place the sticky notes. And Samaritan woman, Peter and Cornelius, the loaves and the fishes, right? The little boy, Mary and Martha, tax collectors. One of my favorite story, not only because I'm not even 5 feet yet, the story of there's always hope. But I'm going to take a moment. This is one of my favorite stories. You know, I love to cook, like some of you have mentioned. Can you imagine? I imagine this beautiful meal, and they're talking, Jesus and Zacchaeus, and wondered if the Pharisees, instead of standing out there looking in, if they joined and ate, I believe that they would have been transformed as well. Jesus and Caiaphas, Jesus and Pilate, Nicodemus. Oh yeah, Nicodemus in the middle of the night. Peter's dreams about food descending. Jesus sending out the disciples. Paul describing food sacrifices to idols, etc., etc. What if we did not have these stories in the scriptures? And there's many more, right? What if we don't have these stories of differences crossing paths in the scripture? What would be left? Jesus came to earth. That was right? So what are some themes that come up when people of difference come across each other, just like Zacchaeus and Jesus? What are some potential? Some bad things can happen for sure. Conflict, yeah. Curiosity. I'm sorry? Greater understanding. Common ground. Hurt feelings. Surprise. Fear. Yeah. Yeah. And transformation. Change, right? The other side of the zoo, right, can happen. In intercultural competency work, one of the trainers I took a class, he said that if you have a sibling, you have a spouse, you have a partner, you have a friend, you're in an intercultural relationship, right? Because there's differences that you're trying to bridge and commonalities that you're drawing across. And so when we think about the local church, those dynamics are happening, whether it's in the ad council meeting or social issues, anti-racism, LGBTQ inclusion. How do we bring people together? How do we amplify the beauty of our diversity? How do we sit in conflict and not avoid it? How do we see each other with dignity, right? So that's another exercise I want to invite you, just share with you as an opportunity to bring to your congregations. I'm going to spend just some time. May I have a few friends help me? I always think I can do these things, and then I realize, Betty, you're not that fast. Thanks. This is a cultural iceberg. So many of us know icebergs are 10, 20% above the water line, and the bottom, 90, 20, 80%. When we talk about culture, that's like all of us, right? The things that shape us, right? And culture is not just race or ethnicity, right? Culture is everything that makes us who we are. And so you will see on top of the iceberg are things that are kind of obvious or visible, observable, such as food, flags, festivities, logos, things, language, arts and crafts. But under the waterline, the bigger part of who we are things that are not obvious to us. And so when we are talking about a new appointment, the clergy person comes with this whole iceberg. And they're coming into a church with an iceberg, with individuals with their own icebergs, right? When we are in a community and a church might have a sign that says all are welcome here or Black Lives Matter, and there is tension in the congregation, we as a congregation has an iceberg, and those individuals are carrying an iceberg. And how do we take time to unpack those? One of the things that I learned from a community organizer, and I've said this many times in other settings, so I apologize for repeating it over and over, but change happens at the rate of relationships. So until we unpack and know each other's cultural iceberg, sometimes the relationships are only surface, and transformation can't happen, And so I'm going to invite you to be in your groups. And not talk so much about the surface culture, but just pick one or two in the deep culture and talk about your own, right? So for example, there's one that says, attitudes towards elders. What's your culture around that? My culture, elders are always right, and they are honored. And I love that. And I also hate it at the same time. And so, but that's part of who I am. And so I still walk around as though I'm 13 most of the time, but I'm not anymore because I have that feeling that everybody's kind of my elders, right? And it affects the way I interact with people, for example. So pick a few, share with one another, and notice similarities and differences within your group, okay? Just pick a few. Okay, maybe you can finish up your thought, and we'll come back together. Anything came up in your groups that you would like to share? Anything that caught your attention? I'm going to share my mic.
Oh, Betty. We talked about tone of voice and eye contact and things like that, and how here in Montana, with different cultures, are taught to not, that looking at someone, making eye contact is a kind of an aggressive or a threatening thing, yet for, like we were saying, it's like, you know, we tell our children, look me in the eye when I talk to you.
Firm handshake?
Yeah.
Firm handshake, look in the eye, right? Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, right. Others, anything, observations, or anything you'd like to share? I'm sorry, if you could, yeah, sorry.
Certainly. My husband is Native American, and I am Caucasian for the most part. And when we first got married, it was kind of difficult because my idea of a great conversation is just on fire, and both people talking rapidly and just a big exchange of ideas. And he thought that I wasn't actually listening to what he was saying because I didn't stop and ponder what he said before I responded. He says, you're just trying to think of what you're going to say next. You're not even listening to me.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
We didn't actually talk about this in our little group, but it occurs for me just thinking about who we be as the church together and our collective cultural iceberg. Every single one of us in this room is old enough to have been deeply shaped by the 20th century church. And we're carting that around with us, even as the 21st century is saying,
You know, that reminds me of conversations happening around decolonizing the church, right? That we have been myself, you know, brought up Methodist, but through missionaries, and we thank God for that, but it's a very European expression of faith, and so to the point that a rejection of our own culture, right? And so how does that work, right? Yeah. So it does give pause. What does it mean to be people of faith? What does it mean to be Christian? What are we imposing on others when it means, are you Christian enough or faithful enough, right? Yeah. Others, any other thoughts or feedback? I offer this again just as a resource. This is one of many. You can just Google online for various cultural icebergs, but I think what we realize is that there's not a right or wrong, but the human in us often has a right or wrong reaction, right? I was having a conversation with a church member from Utah, and we were having a conversation about this family inviting a man from Africa over for dinner, and he used his hands to eat, right? And they know that it's cultural, right? The hosts know that it's cultural, but there's that immediate reaction like, well, why isn't he using the silverware? You know, and because we are in the waters that we're in, right? I mean, we're in the waters that we're in. Betty is in the water that she's in. You are in the water that you're in. Your church is in the water that you're in. And so when there's something different, our immediate reaction is weird, not normal, something's wrong, and so it's become us and them, or those people and me. And so how do we allow ourselves to get to know each other beyond the surface culture into the deep culture so that we can be transformed, so that we can see the other side of the fence in the zoo. Because your new pastor will bring something to your congregation if they bring something new. You will bless your new pastor. The immigrant community, the new neighbors who are coming into your community will offer you something, and they will receive something from you. So we're not at a posture of us and them, but this curiosity, right? This building something new, this exploring the other side of the fence together. And this is around anti-racism. You know, we're not focusing on anti-racism, but this is important because some of you have reached out and say, how do we have this conversation in the church? Because we say, we are a welcoming church. We don't have to worry about racism, you know. But the truth is anybody we have that reaction. We are in the waters that we're in. And so for me, these tools, which literally, I work from home, but, and I have a panel in the back, that's, you know, my Zoom background, as it hides all the mess, and in front of me is a board that literally has these tools in front of me, because I constantly am in the water that I'm in, and I need constant reminders to calibrate myself, to set that reset button every time that I feel myself, you know, having a reaction, right? And so, again, this is just another tool, something that, again, just helps us realize it's not right or wrong, it's different. And how do we create space to explore the diversity and celebrate it? It breaks my heart to know that some of you may know one of our pastors, Reverend Calvin Hill, who's a Native American, and I've been told that some people don't believe his story, that he was in boarding school. Again, that us versus them, we can't believe his story because his story is so different from mine. Surely it's not true. So how do we see humanity, that commonality and the diversity, so that we can hear each other, see each other, celebrate each other? And again, we can't do, you know, we can't do diversity, inclusion work or anti-racism work until we kind of, again, calibrate ourselves in a way that fosters curiosity. Any thoughts or feedback, pushback to those, to any of this? Yeah. Sure, you're welcome. I'm gonna have one more sheet. These are, again, oh, thank you, Dale. And I'm gonna pass some to Janet. This is called a cultural orientation. This is just one of many. This was adapted from one of my colleagues doing this similar work in the in the West Coast. These are just a few. So, you know, most of us are not one or the other, or one thing and another. We're all on a spectrum, and so this just kind of gives language to our diversity, right? So I'm not going to go through each one. Our friends who are joining us virtually, I hope you can see it. If not, through and put an X by where you think you're on the continuum. But I also encourage you to take space. And for those of you who love to talk, share some space. But don't feel obligated to share. But share what you found about yourself and discovered about you, and share it with your neighbors and see if there are similarities or differences. We'll have a few moments to do that. Okay, if you can wrap up your final thoughts, we'll come back together. Anything came up for you? Anything that piqued your curiosity or something that came up in your group or for you that you'd like to share? Oh, Patty, can you just, one moment, thank you, yeah.
So on the task-focused, relationship-focused spectrum, that even shifts depending on the group we're in. So there might be some groups we're in where we're super task-focused and want to get the job done. And other times when we're more relationally based, so it shifts depending on our setting. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Patty. And are there agreements? I think, sometimes we have these unspoken, and so is there space in our churches to say, you know what, this type of gathering is going to be more relational, so expect that. We're going to be more task-oriented in this type of meeting, so just know that that's coming up. And so there's these moments where we name it, so we can ease that kind of any ambiguity or, wondering. Yeah. Others? Anything else come up for you? All right. Thanks, Kim. This, again, is just another tool. There's a lot of other cultural orientations, as you would imagine. But I wanted to share these, again, just for your own discovery, and many of you probably know these things already. Again, it's just a reminder for me every day. I look up and I see these things because, again, we're in the culture, the waters that we're in, and how do we calibrate this ourselves? How do we have a posture, right? How do we open our communities and create communities? How can our churches create a posture of curiosity instead of judgment, right? And ask the question, why or how come? And not in judgment, but we want to know more instead of they are, those people, or that's wrong, right? And then see how there are commonalities that draw us close together, but then also recognize the difference. I will name that I'm a person that likes to bring people together. But if we stay there, we miss out on diversity. This happens in dominant culture. As a Christian culture, as a predominantly white culture, whatever that is, we expect others to be like us. And so we think when everybody is like us, then we're good. We've done our task. But bringing people together, step one. Step two is seeing how the diversity is that other side of the zoo, right? And so don't stop at bringing together. It's how do we see the diversity and learn from that. I will leave with a poem, and then if there's any questions or anything like that. Part of my job, I would say I haven't laughed in a group of people like this in a long time because my work seems so heavy. And I come to the work, not only on Zoom, but not many people know me, not many people know the new job on the conference staff, and so I really come with this, professional, I even texted Eric, do I wear a suit or jeans or what, because there's all these cultural aspects, and I want to earn trust, and so, but my work is so heavy because lives are impacted, right? People's lives, people coming to the church, clergy feeling hurt, all these things. But at the end of the day, it's about relationship. And relationships are supposed to be transformative and joyful, right? And so just a few last thoughts. Curiosity, this is part of discipleship as well. It's part of our faith, constantly growing. I've come to churches and I present things and they're like, we know this already. You're treating us like we're kids. How do we hone that discipleship, right? We can't train our way out. This is a continual practice. Just like the fruit of the Spirit, it's like a practice, right? And so we can't train our way out. Like I mentioned before, transformation happens at the relationships. And then you, me, you, and us. Bishop Karen and I have had conversations about this on, that passage, love your neighbor as yourself. And it's not till I turned 40 a few months ago, and it wasn't till then, I didn't think it was going to be a big deal, but when I turned 40, I realized I didn't really know who I was. You know, kind of always walking with my head down and trying to find my voice. And in this work, I realized that dignity is that, finding your voice. That iceberg is discovering who you are. And when we know who we are, we can love our neighbor better. So it's not a threat. Difference is not a threat then. Because, you know, your difference doesn't make me less than, right? But if we know who we are, then we can receive people fully for who they are. And that has really impacted me in this work, is that love your neighbor as yourself. Love you so you can love others better. Ruby Sales says that, where does it hurt? Where does it hurt? Yeah, and so with that, I'm going to end with this poem by Margaret Wheatley. It says, turning to one another, because it's about relationships. There is no power greater than a community discovering what it cares about. Ask what's possible. Not what's wrong, keep asking. Notice what you care about. Assume that many others share your dream. Be brave enough to start a conversation that matters. Talk to people you know. Talk to people you don't know. Talk to people you never talk to. Be intrigued by the differences you hear. Expect to be surprised. Treasure curiosity more than certainty. Invite in everybody who cares to work on what's possible. Acknowledge that everyone is an expert about something. Know that creative solutions come from new connections. Remember, you don't fear people whose story you know. Real listening always brings people closer together. Trust that meaningful conversations can change your world. Rely on human goodness. Stay together. Blessings to all of you. Thank you for your leadership in creating spaces for diversity and inclusion. Yeah, thank you. You don't have to clap. Just didn't know. Just didn't know if there was final questions. If not, just, you know, reach out to me. MountainSkyUMC.org. You'll find me there.
Of that, much for us to reflect on, chew on, respond to in the days to come. Oops, it's gone. But the line of we can't train our way out of this. And we can't, whoops, I already lost it. We can't fear what the person we can't fear the person whose story we know. So the importance of hearing and genuinely knowing one another's stories. So thank you for being here. Look forward to more conversation. So we have about 10 minutes before the next at 4 o'clock. This is the one on technology. So take a break. Again, the refreshments out there, bathrooms down the hall to the right. You might also think about dinner plans if you are new to Billings. We intentionally left dinner open for you to have dinner in smaller groups instead of at a church gathering. And if you are new to Billings, Pat might be able to give you ideas about restaurants. Also, Angie Dornish, who is the pastor here. You can talk with either one of them and they will give you recommendations. Thank you very much. See you at 4 o'clock.
your inner youth hat. And I know it may have been a while since you were a youth or you did youth ministry, but here is a youth ministry classic in my little world. So does anybody else know the He's a Peach of a Savior song? So it's sung to the tune of the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And I'll sing it for you once, and then I'll invite you to join me. He's a peach of a Savior. He's the apple of my eye. He prunes back the branches when the branches get too high. He bears fruit in season, and his love will never die. And that's why I'm bananas for the Lord. Glory, glory, we're the branches. Glory, glory, we're the branches. Glory, glory, we're the branches, and that's why I'm bananas for the Lord. Okay, so y'all have to stand up. That's why I'm bananas for the Lord. And of course, it's a youth group song, so you get to make motions for everything. So you start with your peach, and then you're going to make the apple of your eye. Okay? He's a peach of a Savior. He's the apple of my eye. He prunes back the branches when the branches get too high. He bears fruit in season, and his love will never die. And that's why I'm bananas for the Lord. And you get to be really crazy with your branches. Glory, glory, we're the branches. Glory, glory, we're the branches. Glory, glory, we're the branches, and that's why I'm bananas for the Lord. Yeah. And this is why you don't give Margaret the microphone.
Thank you, Margaret. All right. All right. So now that you've had a chance to stretch, here's our opportunity to welcome Russ Stornish. This is a arena that is a whole new world, especially in the age of COVID, and as we move through this into the future, technology in the church. So this is Russ's great gift and skill, and Russ said that he would introduce himself instead of having me introduce him to you. So I'm going to pass the microphone to you, Russ, and with gratitude for your gifts.
Thank you. So like Jan said, I am Russ Dornish. My wife is Angie Dornish, who is the pastor here at Hope. So a little bit about me. I do the technology here at Hope, but also I am a part of Crossfire Faith and Gaming, which is an online ministry within the Methodist Church for video games for adults and youth. Yes, we had Bishop Karen on one of our live streams. She got to talk to people. We talked about video games. A lot of fun and a lot of cool things that we're getting to do with that. So technology is a big, big passion of mine. So today we're going to kind of talk about technology in the church. And obviously it is a huge deal that's going on right now. And COVID has lovingly increased the awareness that we need more technology in the church. So while yes, COVID was a terrible, terrible thing, and so many people have lost their lives, and so many horrible things have happened, the one good thing we can say out of it is kind of kicked us into gear of actually doing stuff. So I want to give you a definition of technology. So technology, the earliest and simple form of technology is the development of knowledge that leads to the application of basic tools towards an intended purpose. Okay, the reason why I want to define it and let you know that is the first thing I want to do is ask a question for everybody. How has the church used technology in your lifetime? Okay, so when has the church used technology to change the way that you do church in your lifetime? Does anybody have something they want to throw out? Okay, yep. The live streams that everybody's been starting. Anybody else? You can go back further. There we go. Yeah, the first microphone. I want to go back even further because, and talk about some other things to throw it out there to get you guys thinking. Chairs and pews, that's a technology that was at one point instituted because they used to just stand around and listen to people preach on stages or hills or whatever it took. And I'm talking, we're going way back. But that is a technology, okay? What was that? There it is, yep. Your hymnals, printing the Bible was a technology, being able to mass print that and mass produce. Technology doesn't have to be what you guys probably think it is, which is computers and cell phones and all these different things. It is really anything that helps move us forward and bring us into something new that's going on currently. So the first thing I want to talk about, and this is a big, big passion project because unfortunately, I think we've fallen very far behind in the church with this issue. That's right, there is grace. But this is where we get to learn, and this is where we get to figure that out, okay? So church websites are the most important thing that you need for your church, okay? Over 60% of churchgoers say that a church's website is important in facilitating their participation at the church. 49% of all church giving transactions are now completed by credit card, and 60% of churchgoers are willing to donate their tithings digitally, okay? So those are two huge things, but a lot of you are probably saying, oh, our church has a website. Well, the question I would then ask you is, when was the last time it was updated, okay? I'll give you a story, and I'll pick on Hope because, you know, we had to do a lot of different things when we got here. But one big thing that I did when we found out we were moving to Hope here in Billings was look at the website to see, okay, what kind of church are we going to? And there were a lot of different things and a lot of outdated things on the website. And me as just an outside person looking in, I looked at that website and said to myself, would I actually attend this church if my wife wasn't the pastor? Would I actually, if I was moving to Billings, attend this church just based on the website? And so that is a big deal to have. And since then, we've updated the website. We've became more modern. We've added a lot of different things to the website for people to see and find and make it a lot cleaner and easier to navigate. And we've had a lot of feedback from people who have then said, you know, I found your website and that made me want to come. So that is a huge, huge deal to have. So it's really making sure that your website is modern and looks the way that it needs to now. Even if you have a website you somewhat semi-regularly update, we still need to make sure that it is also looking more modern. There's a lot of different things you can do with that. Now, the next question is, well, how do I do that? I have no idea how to update a website. I don't know how to run a website. The good news is there are tons and tons of solutions out there nowadays, okay? So some of the different websites, and the best part about this is each one of these things has different involvement, okay? If you want to do it yourself and update the website, then there's options for that. If you want somebody else to manage it for you, there's options for that. It's a wide range and ideas and ways that you can do that. So we have WordPress. WordPress, if you're a computer junkie and you want to get in there and do code stuff because you know all that, WordPress is probably for you. Okay, it is a lot of manual stuff, but you can do some amazing things with it. Wix and Squarespace, those are the ones you probably see ads for them all the time, all over the internet. They're great. We use Squarespace here at Hope. It makes it super easy to set up your website. You get manual control, but it's really easy as clicking and dragging, clicking on different parts of the website to edit it. And the pricing is fairly nice on that one. Then another one that I've talked to a lot of people about that is actually church-centered, it's called thechurchco.com. So that one is really great because they will actually walk with you and build the website for you and manage it for you. So if you don't know anything but you want a modern, updated website, the Church Co. is a really great resource, and they do not charge a ton of money. You're looking anywhere between spending $50 to a couple $100 a month. It sounds like a lot, and I know that not a lot of churches have those kind of funds, but this is a big priority that you should have. Those funds go a long way to attracting new people and getting people in your doors, because honestly nowadays, that's how you're figuring out who's going to come to your church. It is no longer, I drove down the street and I saw your church and I wanted to come check it out. Even if they see that, what they're probably going to do is they're going to Google your church, go to the website, find out more information. When is service? Who's the pastor? What are the different programs and activities you offer at the church? And then again, if it looks modern and updated and fresh, that's going to attract younger crowds. They're looking for that updated and new feel. And that's probably the biggest thing that we have to go after when we're in the church, is really getting that modern, updated feel so that we can attract some of the younger people in our communities. And probably my biggest idea when it comes to websites is, and it's my favorite quote from my favorite TV show, The Office, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, which was a Wayne Gretzky quote, but he stole it. We have to take the chance and actually go after the people in our community. If we don't even try with updating our websites, if we don't even try getting them constantly updated throughout the week to let people know what's going on, you're going to miss out on a lot of opportunities that would have been there. And the worst thing that can happen is you don't see any growth, you don't see success, but almost guaranteed you're going to see some sort of success or growth through just updating and getting your website into the 21st century. Next is the big one, okay? This is the one that we've all been thrusted into in one way or another, or we may not be doing it, but it's our online worship, okay? So the questions I have is, who does it help? Is it bad? And is it really church? Who here has read the very famous, in the last couple months, op-ed piece from the New York Times that said that we should drop online services? Okay. If you haven't, feel free to Google it. It's from Tish Harrison Warren. I do not agree with any of it. It's really bad. So her points are, online church was great during the pandemic. It was a great thing to have, but we're out of the pandemic and we need to drop it completely because we're ruining church. And the biggest thing that I probably take away from that, and it's something that I want to talk about and who does it help, is we have missed a large section of our community and population. That's the homebound, that's the immunocompromised. It is all of those people. The article to me really comes across as ableism because they are completely cutting off that side of the community that has now been fed for the last 3 years thanks to our online services. Okay? There is a large group that we've been missing for decades and we haven't even thought about them. And the churches who have been doing online are the ones that end up getting those people because they're the only ones offering an online option for them from their homes. So, is online worship bad? No, it's not bad. Now, do we need to talk about the idea of, okay, church is about community, church is about connection. Okay, there's ways to do that and still have a good online portion of your community. As I said, I'm part of an online-only ministry that meets regularly, weekly, daily, all over the place. And we connect with people who are not attending church. The church has either hurt them, they cannot walk through the doors of the church because of the trauma that they've had in the past, but they're able to connect with us online, and we meet and have community online. You can do that. Here at Hope, one of the ways that we connect with our online members is we do our Bible studies and we have them online as an option as well. I know that everybody's zoomed out and all of that stuff from the pandemic, but it's still nice to have those options for people at home. During the pandemic, we've seen a vast and a large growth amount just from having a good online service and then having those options throughout the week for community. Being now in Montana for 3 years, knowing how spread out everybody is, how bad the weather can be at sometimes. There's a lot more options than just a pandemic that can cause people not to be able to attend church. And if we can prepare for those things, then we can actually reach those people. Hope has a very large snowbird population. I know a lot of the churches in Montana have that. We have heard from every one of those people how amazing it is that they get to continue attending Hope even when they're in Arizona or Florida during the winter. They still have that connection to their home church. And that is a huge, huge benefit to have. And I think we all really need to start looking at, are we doing the right things? Are we providing these online services? And how can we make them better? And then, of course, the question, is it really church? Obviously, I'm saying yes, it is, because you're getting fed. And then the big part of it is, can we create a two-way street? So not just streaming our online services, but am I also offering Bible studies? Am I also connecting with people in other ways? Those are really huge aspects to creating an online platform and an online presence. Social media is another aspect of that, okay? Communicating with your congregation online, whether that's through Facebook, I will say Facebook is really kind of the last frontier. Facebook is not where all the young people are nowadays, okay? It's the Twitter, it's Instagram, it's TikTok, it's all these different social media platforms. And if you don't know what those are, find a young person in your church and ask them, and they can potentially help you get those things set up. We will help. Young people are very happy to help churches figure that stuff out. Okay, so online worship, it's reported that 33% of churchgoers have found their current churches online. By expanding your online reach with live streams and other media, you have the opportunity to connect with new parishioners. Okay, our membership in the last 2 years or so at Hope has grown dramatically. We just received the One Matters Award for being a constant growth even during the pandemic. And part of that was our online presence. It was Angie offering online devotions on YouTube regularly. It's our online service, and we've slowly but continuously upgrading that to make sure that it's the best possible experience for somebody online. But any type of online presence you can have, it's the first point of contact that people are going to get. And the more presence you have, the more you're going to show up in search results, the more that you're going to show up when somebody's looking for a church. It's really weird stuff, but it can be as simple as, if I'm just constantly posting and making sure that our presence online is active, people will find your church. And there's lots of other ways to connect online as well. We've been really using Facebook advertising, Twitter advertising, Instagram advertising. It's cheap. You can advertise for as little as $10, and you can reach up to 1,000 people with that $10. And we have seen a massive result, especially here in Billings. When we first got here, the first thing we did was we did a fall festival here at the church. We advertised online, and we ended up having 500 people show up to our little fall festival because they were just so anxious to have something to do, and they found it online. Through that, we grew a couple members. We keep doing events like that and running small ad campaigns on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and it's so easy to do, and they'll even walk you through it. I mean, if you just go to the advertising on Facebook, it'll literally walk you through what an ad it looks like, how much it'll cost, you set the budget, and then from there it's ran during a very specific time. Okay, so online worship. I'm going to assume that a lot of the clergy in here, a lot of the people who have churches can probably say at this point they do have an online stream, okay? But can we make it better? And if you don't have an online worship currently, how do we start, okay? It can be as simple as, everybody in here, I assume, please, somebody raise their hand. Does anybody not have a cell phone at this point? Okay, thank God, thank you. Okay. So we all have cell phones. At worst case, just to get an online presence, you guys can pull out a cell phone, get a little tripod. You can buy for like $10 a little wireless mic that plugs into an iPhone or an Android phone, and you can go from there and stream directly to YouTube, Facebook, anything. That's all you need to get started, okay? And the biggest thing I can say is, if you're not already streaming, just start, okay? You'll see people respond to even just the basic things that you can do. From there, you can upgrade. We moved on to a camera that was called the Mevo. A couple churches in town used it. It was, I think, like $300, if I remember right, so pretty cheap. And it streams directly to a phone that then streams to whatever platform you choose, Facebook or YouTube. That's a cheap option to just kind of move a little bit further away from the cell phone if you want. But honestly, I will tell you this. Any of the most recent cell phones, iPhones, and all that, they film in 4K. It's probably one of your best options. From there, you can go even further. So we ended up upgrading our technology during COVID. We raised some funds. We applied for a grant with the conference, which was amazing to have, and we were able to upgrade our system. So if you guys take a look in the back, you're going to see 2 cameras up top. Those are the 2 cameras that we now use in our services, so we do get a couple angles. It also allows us to switch between the cameras so that people online aren't seeing us move the cameras around. They fully move and they zoom all the way in. If Dave, who's back there doing the tech for me while I do this, he could zoom in and get really close to my face, and I hope he doesn't do that. So Um, yes. So we did that. We added the computers back there. For a computer, we are using a Mac Mini. It was $700 for the computer. It's able to run everything that we need. Okay, you don't have to go that crazy. Those cameras back there are each, and it's going to sound like a lot, but honestly, it's actually a pretty good bargain. Each camera is about $1,500. In total, in upgrades that we added to Hope that has completely and drastically changed our online presence, it went about $10,000 for all the upgrades. It sounds like a lot, but that's on the higher end, I would say. So like I said, you can start with a cell phone, and you can move on up to more professional cameras. And so, like I said, I highly recommend that you guys start thinking about and start budgeting and getting the money together to do something, because it does bring results. The quote that we got when we were looking at doing our cameras and upgrades is, you can see anywhere between a 60 to 80% increase in your attendance just from having an online presence. Okay, so as we continue through, and we just talked about the upgrades, what is really important to have, okay? I'd say number one is audio. Everyone at home needs to hear you first and foremost, okay? So whatever that looks like, whoever you need to talk to, find somebody who knows what they're doing with audio. That is first and foremost the most important thing, okay? Because honestly, seeing you is not as important as hearing you. And we've learned that greatly throughout this entire process, that the ability to hear is the most important aspect of any platform or thing that you put together for online worship. From there, obviously, then camera is great. But like I said, really that audio aspect is going to be your most important. And I'm not an audio person. That is not my side of things. So I've had to talk to a lot of different people and ask who know what they're doing with audio to kind of understand it better. But it's really the most important aspect to it. And then obviously I just talked about the cost, the wide range. You can go from a couple bucks to things that you already have to several $1,000s to really get an upgraded and better experience with your live streams. So before I get into questions, the last little bit that I want to talk about is just the importance and the risk of just jumping in and needing to go and get the technology and do that. The investment that you guys put on this is extremely important. And I think that's probably where we've fallen behind the most as a church. There's probably people in your church that are willing to help you, that know what they're doing, that want to do this stuff, but we need to figure out and realize that this is an important thing. Like I said, unlucky, but luckily, we had the pandemic, and that has really kicked us into gear to realize the importance of this. But now we need to actually put our money where it needs to go. We actually need to show the importance of that. You know, finding somebody who wants to run your technology. And again, and I'll say this is a big thing that we as a church need to come together on as well. You know, finding a volunteer is great and all, but you kind of get what you pay for. If you really want your online presence to be what it needs to be, find somebody and be willing to pay them some money to do it, so that you have a dedicated, somebody you can count on, somebody who can do this and teach others and be there for that. Be ready to invest in somebody to run that stuff for you. Especially you clergy in here, you guys don't need to be doing all of this technology stuff, okay? You guys have plenty on your plates. You don't need to focus on it. Get somebody you can trust to run all this stuff. And then, you know, pay them a little bit of money to help them be able to show up and do that stuff, okay? We need to start investing in our people within our church instead of just relying on solo volunteers, okay? Volunteers can help so much, but if we can get that little bit extra in aspect and show that importance, you're going to get what you pay for, okay? Does anybody have any questions or anything like that? Yep. Okay. Yep. So do you have an iPhone? Okay. You just go on Amazon, just search wireless mic for iPhone. It literally plugs into the bottom of your phone. I think you can get it as cheap as $10. And then So you can literally record from your phone on a tripod right next to you on the pew, and then speak into the mic, and there, you've got an easy, simple solution. It shouldn't. Most of them shouldn't. Sometimes they do, but like I said, it shouldn't. There's other ways you can connect your phone directly into your soundboard if you have a soundboard. Like I said, having somebody that knows a little bit about audio, you can ask them. They can easily say, okay, this is how I'm going to connect your phone to that, and we'll use your phone to film. Yep. Yes?
Do you have a plan in place, coming from the safety presentation I did, should something bad happen, to cut off the live stream?
Yep.
Have that, you want to continue broadcasting that, but then the investigative part would be, would you continue recording it?
Yeah. I mean, I would assume you might want to cut all that. You don't want to, yes. Recording it would be great, obviously, because then you get that aspect to it. If you can cut your live stream if something bad happens, I would absolutely say you do that, because you don't want to be broadcasting that. Most of the platforms like YouTube and Facebook that people use to broadcast, if you broadcast something like that, you will get banned from that platform. So yes, correct. But I mean, if I'm back there and something bad's happening, I just push one button and then I, take off running, whatever I need to do. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, but that'll be a part of it. Yes?
I would politely disagree with your statement about it's easy to find people in your congregation.
I get that, yep.
No. So my question is, how many people does it take for you to run your
One person. And on the really basic one that I talked about, the phone and the microphone, it could just take the pastor. I would highly recommend against that, but
that was my second part is I think, what's going to happen in your situation when your pastor moves along? And that's what we're seeing. Talk about the training.
yeah, no. So, I mean, it's really important to also then train other people. We have done a lot of training with some of our older congregants who have decided, and we talked to them about it, who's not too scared of learning something new and figuring it out. And we had quite a number of older people that have been in our church for a long time, who have been here for a long time. So they came, we did some training, they're getting hands-on, and they're getting to run the system on Sundays when I'm not around, or whenever they want to figure that out. Yep.
We're going to have a more visual aspect, but I'm just really concerned that when our pastor moves along and takes his spouse with him, we'll be back.
Yeah, the key is to have that conversation with them and make sure that they know, because it is true. I mean, we're Methodists, so we know that the pastor's not going to be there forever, and especially if they're tied in whatever way they are with the technology, like here at Hope. I'm obviously the pastor's spouse, so whenever we move on, I won't be here anymore. It's making sure that we have that conversation with the congregation and we say, okay, who would be interested in learning this long term and really working on it? And then if we do move on, okay, are you willing to step in and fill that role? As far as you said with the, it's easy to find somebody, I didn't mean it's like easy to just say, who. But if you do enough searching, I think you'll be surprised at who in your congregation may be willing to do that. Because, as I would say, tech team is probably one of the most introverted jobs that you can do at a church in a world where most jobs are requiring you to be an extrovert. So there are definitely people who would love to serve, but they're scared to serve. And tech team is kind of the easy one to say, I can probably do that because I don't have to interact with people. So, no, I don't have to talk. I don't have to stand at the door greeting people. I don't have to be on Sundays. I can just go and come in the doors, walk straight to my booth, and just sit there and not have to deal with anything. That's a job that there's usually people who want to fill that, okay? So it's not easy, obviously, to find volunteers in the church, but if you do go searching, there's definitely probably somebody that would be willing to do that. Yes? Dave is. I'm still kind of getting new into all this technology stuff, you know, I just have some of my basic stuff down, but if Dave wants to come up here and say something about tech. Where is it? There it is. So this is Reverend David Petty. He is the founder and head of Crossfire Faith and Gaming that we have. Yes.
Yeah, so really quick, and good job with your presentation. I've been the tech guy for Russ while he was presenting. But yeah, so Subsplash is an excellent platform. For those of you that don't know, we're actually going to go to it at my church in Colorado Springs. It is a multi-platform platform. So Subsplash, their whole thing is like publish once, and then it distributes to all your platforms. So it gives you live streaming to YouTube, Facebook, and their own app that is available on phones, Apple and Roku TV, and the website. So it's kind of an all-in-one thing, but it comes with an all-in-one price. So I think it's going to cost us like $230 a month. But were we paying somebody to actually develop a website that had those capabilities, it would cost us exponentially more than that. So part of what we're looking at it is both from an outreach standpoint as well as a service, and from the accessibility standpoint, we have a lot of people at our church that can't physically participate. So we've been constantly asking the question of how do I improve the quality of worship for those people who physically can't make it into the building, to go from them as attendees to active participants, right? So they're no longer just passively watching other people do worship, but they're able to actually engage. So I like Subsplash because it has a chat feature in the app. You can do Bible studies. It's got a Bible in there, and online giving for far less than any other of the competitors in the church online giving space. So.
Will Subsplash let you do duo videos by sign language interpreter and pastor? Because there's a huge...
I don't think does that, but there are platforms out there where you can have, there are programs that you can plug into your streaming software that will do live captions. So it's not ASL, but there's also ways, and I would say if you want to chat with me afterwards, there are ways that you could bring that video feed in through a software like OBS, so you've got dual videos in one video.
Yep.
Yeah.
So for instance, with the stream that's going on right now at home, they're seeing a picture-in-picture right now with this slideshow. However, we can also do picture-in-picture with our different cameras. So if we wanted to, we could have somebody signing and do a picture-in-picture and have the camera on them. So that's where you're going to get a little bit more complex, obviously, because now you're talking about 2, 3, 4 cameras. But it is doable, and it's not that difficult to set up and have it going. David and I have been working, because I haven't completely dived into our software that we just got, but we're using ProPresenter, which is a big church platform that allows different things like the picture-in-picture, us putting the media into the presentation that you saw today, but them also being able to see it at home. So there is such a wide spectrum of how complex you want to make it and how expensive you want to make it, or how simple you want to do. I think the biggest thing, though, that we need to start taking away from this and really figuring out is we need to at least be doing something. And then as we go, if you upgrade and think of those things as you have it happen, you know, currently we don't have anybody that in our congregation has reached out and said, you know, we would love to see this. If somebody did, we would absolutely then start looking at that and looking at an upgrade to get that going. Oh yeah, no, I know, everywhere. So again, there are things that we're just slowly working on, slowly upgrading and figuring out as we go, but it doesn't need to be something that's super scary for a lot of people, which I think right now that's kind of the stigma that we're having to kind of combat.
Yeah. I would just, if I could add,
yeah,
and then I'll go back and sit down. Don't be afraid to reach out for help.
Yes.
And this is one of the things Russ and I have kind of talked about in terms of the fact that we have this online gaming ministry. We're available if you want to ask for help with how to set stuff up. I have people email me all the time, set up Zoom meetings. And so it doesn't have to be scary, and it doesn't have to be that you're doing all this technology stuff alone. There's a lot of people out there who'd be happy to help you get set up, and even people in your local area who might be willing to come help you set some of that stuff up, just because they have a passion for it. So I'm at St. Paul's in Colorado Springs. Yep.
Yeah, so if you guys have any, anything after this, or you see me around and you have a question or anything like that, or you see my wife around and you want to ask her, I can give you guys our business cards that have all our information that you can find either our ministry or our straight contact if you guys have direct questions or things that you want help with. We are happy to help. We're kind of looking at how does that look in the church, and we're definitely finding there's a lot of people obviously that want this stuff to happen, and we're happy to help with it. So any other questions? Yes.
I just would also add, there's always grants and things that you can apply for. So, if you're really worried about it, not only are there financial grants that the conference has, and it's more than we realize. It really is. Annie Arnaldi always jokes. She's like, "We've got money. We're ready to give it away. You just have to apply." And that's the truth. So, even if your church was like, "Man, we don't have $500, right?" You could do
Yep.
a garage sale. You could do some sort of a fundraiser at your church to raise money for technology.
Yep.
But it really comes down to what are you investing in,
Yeah, absolutely. Like she said, I know David and I, for Crossfire, we've gotten a number of grants from the conference for different things, and it's just very interesting once you start looking into it, how many things are available out there to help you with whatever you're looking for. I know that Grace in town just got a grant to upgrade their speakers and their sound system because, again, audio is the most important thing that you have in a church service and an online service. So it's a huge deal for that. Like you talked about over here with upgrading different things for, different disabled groups or whatever that looks like, I know that there's grants available just to help you bridge that gap. Guarantee you could say, hey, we want an extra camera so we can start having, somebody signing during service for online. I guarantee you can find a grant to help you pay for the cameras that would allow you to do that. There's a lot of things out there to help you within the conference, outside the conference, outside the Methodist Church. It doesn't just have to be that. There's a lot of different things available to help you guys. But I really think we need to start focusing on ways that we can upgrade our experience, ways that we can upgrade our website. That's probably the biggest one. Go home or get on your phone and go to your church's website, see how it functions. The big one is, how does it function on a cell phone? A lot of people don't think about that. Because a lot of older websites and the codes that they have, if you go to the website and your cell phone actually break the website. So those are things to check out and ask questions about. And then who is updating your websites? If that's something you want to learn about, of how do I update a website? What does it look like? I would love to be able to keep things updated and maybe take that off the plate of somebody else, i.e. the pastor, if they're updating the website frequently and regularly. Those are little things you can do. And then, like I said, if we're just getting started as far as streaming goes, pull out a cell phone one Sunday. I will say there's a lot of grace, and we can communicate that with our members because, unfortunately, technology does tend to break. But you'll be surprised how often it can actually work and do a really good job of creating something that really helps your church out. Yes? Yep. Okay.
Is there a simple, and I'm saying simple because they want me to do it all, and I'm like, sorry, I can't. I mean, I can, but I think they're gonna have to get.
Yep.
Is there a simple program to start with that I could easily teach someone who has no clue about technology that you can recommend?
Yeah, there's a lot of things. I mean, are we talking about, and her question, and I'm going to repeat it just because online can't hear you. That's another thing, FYI. I just remembered because I've been telling to Dave, because that's my biggest pet peeve, and a lot of our congregants have to get used to it. Speaking into microphones is the most important thing, because if you don't, they can't hear you online. We have people who come up and they have a prayer request or they have an announcement, and we try to hand them a mic and they're like, no, I'm loud enough. I don't need a microphone. Well, it's not that you're not loud enough. The people online can't hear you. So her question was, what programs are available for somebody who's just wanting really simple? And are you talking about within the sanctuary or online?
I think I was originally
Okay. I mean, you go as simple as like PowerPoint if you want just a slideshow on a TV screen. I'll let you guys know that we had to really quickly set this up because we don't normally have visual aids in our sanctuary. We haven't gotten to that point yet. We're probably going to start using it because I finally started figuring some more things out. But right now, I am using an Apple TV in the back. And it literally was a 2-button press, and it showed up on the screen. Same with like your Roku, your Google Chromecast that you guys hear about. Those things all have capabilities to mirror stuff on your cell phone or your computer. And so those kind of things really help wirelessly if you're looking for that. Or if you just want to connect a computer straight to a TV, you can do that and run PowerPoint. And now you've got slides going on your TV. Yes?
I put in TVs in a church, and there were more than one. And so
Yep.
you might also have to get software to sync them all. Ditto was something that worked well with syncing Apple TV.
Yep. No, there's a lot. I mean, we can get as complex. I mean, there's, like we just said with Subsplash and all the different things, there is a piece of software out there for whatever you're looking for. If you just simply search or ask people for it, you'd be surprised what solutions are out there. If you want to go as simple as just, I want to be able to put up, the worship music on a screen, like I said, PowerPoint is a simple answer. If you want to do it so I can easily share it with people, Google has free options as well within their Google Suites. So if you guys, anybody uses Google Docs or Google Sheet, what's the Slides is their PowerPoint. But Google Drive is an amazing thing, and it's free. And all of their programs are free. Also, the other thing I can say, and this is, David actually just taught me this, there are a lot of nonprofit connections online to get you software and hardware at a cheaper price, if not for free. The big one that he uses that I'm going to start using is called TechSoup. So you can connect to that. David's going to come back out because he's going to have to explain it to everybody. I got our church connected with Google. They have a nonprofit program. So we have email accounts for the church. They normally charge you a pretty decent chunk of money. We got it for free because we're a nonprofit. So all we had to do was upload our nonprofit license to Google, and within about a week we got it back. And so we have up to 10 emails that we can do at Hope UMC through Google for free. We don't have to pay for that. That's a huge, huge benefit, not to mention then we have all the other Google Suite aspects of Google Docs and all those things. There is tons of options out there. David? Oh, you put it there.
You have heard of TechSoup? Okay, awesome. So if you're not signed up already with TechSoup, do that because, like Russ said, software, hardware, even Dell computers, things like that, and the whole Google Suite through TechSoup. It does take a little bit of management, so it takes somebody to learn it. But again, that's one of those things that I think if you've got a designated tech person, or even just a kid in your congregation, you say, hey, do you want to learn about how to set up technology? I hate to throw the youth under the bus all the time, but it is one of those things. If you just ask some of the kids, or if you ask somebody in your community, right? It doesn't have to be a church member, and in some ways I think sometimes it's best if it's not a church member, because then they don't feel like they have to miss out on worship, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to go along with that, if you work in the community, if you don't work in the church, most likely your business or whatever you're connected to has some person that's in IT. Feel free to ask them, and they can usually guide you in the direction, or maybe they want to help. I don't know. There's a lot of options with that. But searching for nonprofit stuff, there's a lot out there for you. Website hosting, you can get nonprofit discounts for that as well. Us as nonprofits get a lot of benefits from that I don't think churches use as much as they think they have. It's not just that you don't get taxed, it's that you also have options for different things that can really help the organization. Okay, yeah. David, you want to come back up here? You want to come up? Yeah.
Just real quick.
Yeah.
Are you giving out free money?
Yes, since you asked, I just as Russ was talking, it reminded me that I get the privilege of serving on the Congregational Vitality Committee for the conference, and in that role, Reverend Rainwater, who leads that group as a superintendent, has gifted me the position of convening the technology grant team. And so that has just happened, and so we're just getting started. So we will have a process, hopefully by August or September, to be able to offer grants. So just if you are looking for a grant, just bug me, get a hold of me, and so I can keep you on the radar, and we'll have a process for engaging those grants. Right now, we probably have, I don't know, somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000. One of the first things I want to do is see that increase for the entire conference, because that is not that's not a lot for the conference. But we're working on some avenues, some resources to get some more financial resources for that. So, Mark Calhoun, you can find me just about anywhere. There are probably only 600 or 700 people in Montana and Wyoming that don't have my cell number. So, if you're one of those, you can find it. But yeah, please get a hold of me so that we can keep you on a list, and then we'll release to the entire conference sort of the process for getting those grants and other questions as well. I've helped incorporate technology in about a half a dozen or a dozen now churches across our conference, and Episcopal churches and other churches in our area. So I would love to help answer some of those questions as well. So.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Oh,
yeah.
Hey, that worked out.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's options everywhere. Don't think that money is the deterrent. Okay, it should never be the deterrent to upgrading your technology and getting connected online. Any other questions or comments or anything like that? Yeah. You heard what I said. I can't hear you online.
I think that UMC Communications also may have some grants out there too. So just Google, and but I think the wider church might have some resources to help with funding and some training. I think they have some training videos. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments, anything like that? Okay. We went short.
Thank you.
Which is good.
Thank you.
Yes.
What a rich and full afternoon. Again, thanks to Rick and Patty and Betty and Russ for sharing your gifts and skills with us this day. So you are free to 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock is the lecture with Nadia Boltz-Weber. If you have questions about possible places for dinner or how to get to MSUB, I'll be around in the entryway here and glad to answer questions. And I know Angie, thank you, will as well. And Russ can too, exactly. And then tomorrow morning, just a reminder, tomorrow morning at Shiloh United Methodist Church out on the west end of Billings, we start at 9 o'clock with worship. Thanks to Mark Johnson for leading us in worship, and the bishop will be sharing a message with us, and then our district event. So that's 9 to 11, and then there are also, after the 11 o'clock hour, there'll be a bag lunch to go. So feel free to pick up a bag lunch for your way home. And again, if there are any questions, Angie, Russ, I will be out in the entryway to help you out between now and the Nadia Boltz-Weber event at MSUB this night. So looking forward to sharing